This is somewhat similar to flirting. If you give a woman/man attention and then remove it, she moves closer to you. The same principle is taught in New Age as desire and let go. Desire is turned into the gratitude of already having received. This can also be called non-attachment/non-disinterest. You're interested in manifestation and evidence, but you don't attach to it as if it were something you're dependent on. Again, this is similar to flirting. You are interested in the manifestation, but you don't attach to it. Again, this is similar to flirting. You meet someone you like. You like to get closer to the person. You exchange phone numbers. The excitement increases. But you don't call on the same evening equals attachment, urgency you lack. But wait for a few days, let go for a few days. Maybe she won't be able to bear the tension and call you before. Otherwise, you simply call after 3 to 4 days, and she is interested in seeing you again. Were you to wait too long, let's say a month, that would seem like disinterest, and she would have long forgotten you. OceanoFPDF.com. 12 Action and Reality. The statement, action creates reality, is not really true, but it's what people believe the strongest. And by believing it with such conviction, they make it true. Someone might say, well, I will go to the gym and lift weights. I will do this 3 times a week for 8 months, and then I will have muscles. Nearly anyone would agree that this is true, that it was the action of training 3 times a week for 8 months that created the muscle. And from a purely physical point of view, this seems very true. But what actually created the muscles was the person's belief in the process, the person's decision to be that person, that version of himself. In order to experience a progression on a timeline with its result, the belief was connected to an action. Without those actions, he might not have been willing to believe it would work. Were he to believe that he has muscles without having to do anything for it then? Yes, he would have muscles without having done anything for it. As unlikely as it may seem to some readers, it is possible to do nothing or hardly anything and still achieve anything. Action only becomes necessary for people who don't believe in belief preceding action. However, this belief in action to be source of a reality and as deep as it may be ingrained in a mass consciousness does not have to be taken as a limitation to your creative power, but to your creative benefit. As you've come to this planet to live the life of a physical being in a physical world, it is action, movement, doing, acting, and behavior. You can use this circumstance to the benefit of reality creation. Attention and intention create reality. But because most believe that action creates reality and that it just isn't enough to visualize your dream, we will agree. While it is the intention behind taking the action which determines the result of the action, it is the action itself that midwifes the energy into rough matter, into form. In the following, I'd like to discern 3 major types of actions. Number 1, action based on fear and urgency. The payoff, if this type of action, is that people believe it will motivate them to act. But of all 3 types of actions, this one is the furthest from the reality creation viewpoint. Not only is action deemed necessary, but bad consequences are stipulated if one doesn't act. This type of action is more reactive than active. You are presented with a problem, and then you fall into reaction, or you're working under time or money pressure instead of following your soul's path. Or you're working to fix things that are broken instead of placing attention on what's good for you. Fear is used as a motivator to action. Many people actually believe if there's no fear factor, people will not act. While this may be true on a low level of spiritual development, it is no longer effective if you wish to live a conscious, deliberate, spiritually mature life. The only time this type of action is helpful is when you are in deepest apathy or depression and need a wake-up call, or when you have dozens of unfinished things that are building up due to your neglect. In these rare cases, action based on fear and urgency is helpful. Otherwise, it's just compensatory action. Compensatory actions are things you do to make up for bad thinking, bad feeling, bad reality creating. You attract something unwanted into your life through negative thinking and feeling, and then you act to make up for it, to make it better. This is not very effective and will, in most cases, cause even more unwanted events to happen. Making important decisions, taking steps, Going into action out of fear or urgency will cause events that create even more fear and urgency. Like attracts like, the more incompetent a political leader or corporate leader is, the less he will assign tasks based on vision. The more he will assign tasks based on fear of an enemy or job loss. Number 2, inspired action or action towards your desires. This type of action will create much more of the results you want in life. This is the action you take from a positive state, a good point of view, actions that arise from well-being. This could be planned and coordinated action that you take after you've written down a specific action plan or timetable. Or this can also mean to act upon opportunities that present themselves to you after you've given off positive energy. In the first variation, you set a goal, then you write down actions to it. Then you follow through on these actions. This is the contemporary mass consensus way of creating a reality. In the second variation, you set a goal or desire, send the energy off to the universe, and simply relax and wait for opportunities to present themselves and act upon them. In any case, you don't act out of fear, but out of joy and inspiration, out of positive expectation that you are heading toward your desire. In this second type of action, you actually work and do less. The more energy you have, the less you have to do. Or another way to put it, when you're energized, your actions don't feel like hard work or effort. To outsiders, you may in fact appear to be doing a lot, but inside you are having a great time. Often action becomes fun when you associate it with some personal benefit. Maybe you remember a time you didn't want to go to school or work. You felt heavy in the morning, needed plenty of coffee to drag yourself there. Then something changed. You fell in love with someone at school or work and couldn't wait to get there, feeling energized, forgetting even the coffee because you had to rush to work. That is the difference between inspired action and pressured action. Number 3, acting from the viewpoint that something is already real, what some errantly call acting as if. This is by far the most magical of actions. In this type of action, you take on the being of the desired reality. You are not acting towards a reality, towards the goal. You are acting as the reality. You are doing the things you would be doing if they were already real. You're going the places you would be going if they were already real. You are meeting the people you would be meeting if they were already real. You are behaving like you would be behaving if you were already in your desired reality, since the universe of energy is a copy machine that reflects your vibratory being. You demonstrate to the universe of energy who you are, and it will reflect to you events that match that. Physicalizing a desire means to come as close as possible to the real thing, to bring the real thing into the here and now, into the today, acting it, role-playing it as close to the original as possible. A convincing role-play as not very far away from the real thing. This is one way of tuning in. From a certain perspective, this third type of action may take some courage at first. But once you notice the magical results you get from it, get more used to it, you will apply it with joy. Because here, you are actually taking the most direct path. If you can already be something today, you won't need any exercises or any patience or any proof. Because you are representing, being, demonstrating that reality you said you want. You're already experiencing it and no longer have to achieve or follow or create it. Now, to help you differentiate between the 3 types of actions, I will share some examples with you. Action type 1, fear-based action, will rarely yield any positive results. Action type 2, inspired action will eventually always yield positive results. Action type 3 will yield positive and quick results. The difference between action type 2 and 3. In working towards a goal, you say, okay, I'm going to do this, then that, then this, and that. And then I can experience this. That's creating reality on a timeline. In working as a goal, you make the yin the starting point. You say, I'm going to be this today, and from this being I will do this and that. So here's some examples. We will look at Michael, Tom, and Sharon. Michael always applies level 1 type actions. Tom always applies level 2 type actions, and Sharon always applies level 3 type actions. The first desire they want to manifest is to have more money. Michael buys a book called Overcoming Your Fear. Tom buys a book called How to Get Rich. Sharon buys a book by someone who is rich. Michael starts working much harder, putting in overtime, and talking bad about other employees behind their backs. A movie think will put him in a favor with his boss. Tom starts prioritizing and time planning his work to become more effective. He starts talking good about his boss. A movie thinks will give him a pay raise. Sharon finishes her old job and starts doing the creative, self-employed work she always wanted to do, because that would be what she would be doing if she were already wealthy. The second desire they want is to find the right partner for their life. Michael starts running after a girl from the office. He doesn't really like her, but he'll accept second best for now, because his self-esteem is not up to speed with more. Tom specifies his desire and puts some ads on internet dating forums. Sharon cleans up her place as if she were expecting that special visitor, opens a bottle of wine, puts out 2 glasses. She dresses up for him. She goes through the motions, acting out a dance with him. To an outside viewer, it might look silly, but she is applying the method of physicalizing a dream. The third desire is to hold speeches in front of large groups. Michael doesn't do anything about this. Tom goes to workshops where he can learn to hold good speeches. Sharon visits good speeches. She goes into the energy field of what she wants. Later, she books a room with many chairs in it. Maybe she even puts foam plastic human figures into the chair. After preparing materials for the group, she holds a long speech in that room, as if she were really doing it. These examples should suffice for you to get the point. Michael will not get much of any results. Tom will eventually get results. And Sharon will get very quick and often surprising results only a few days after she has ritualized her desire. In order not to overwhelm your belief system, I recommend to you a healthy mix of type 2 and type 3 actions. Despite the fact that action is not source of reality, it is advisable to be well-versed in all disciplines and recommended that you do exercise your ability to take action. This is especially recommended to people who are not willing to believe many things mentioned in this book. If you're not willing to believe in the power of consciousness, then action is your only option to make anything move. I'd like you to build your action muscle. In some dictionaries, the word power is defined as the ability to take action. If your action muscle isn't built, if you have negative beliefs about what action means, like, oh, action is hard work, or if you shy away from challenging actions, you can retrain this ability. Undertaking challenging or difficult actions does not mean acting in the first type of a fear-based way. Tackling challenges can also be done with joy, taking the bull by its horns and just doing what needs to be done rather than running away from it can be a very liberating experience. Suddenly ending procrastination. Think about or list something you've been putting off, postponing, not confronting for a while. Something unfinished that needs to be taken care of because it has been dominating your attention or mood for a while. Think of the feeling of relief you'd have when it is taken care of. Think of what it would be like to have it behind you rather than in front of you. And then, suddenly, simply put an end to your procrastination and take care of it. Finish it, do it, and afterwards notice how much attention is freed because of it. Having all kinds of unfinished things, commitments that have not been taken care of, sucks attention energy like a sponge. When everything you committed to as a priority is taken care of, you're in a state of free attention, clean slate, tabula rasa. It is from this point, from this state, that it is much, much easier to focus on what you want. Conscious and deliberate action. This exercise is designed to change your state of awareness and mood to the better. It is designed to exaggerate a state of complete conscious awareness and completely self-determined action. To begin this exercise, announce what you will do next. After you've announced it, do it. Having done that, announce what you will do next. Having announced that, do that. Continue for a while in this manner. Announcing, then doing. Announcing, then doing. Announcing, then doing. Only do what you announced. An example of this exercise. I say, I will go over to the window. And I do it. I will touch the window. I do it. I will turn around. I do it. I will sit down. I do it. I will play with the alarm clock. I do it. So, this exercise is initially done with small things that don't take long to do in progression and for at least 15 minutes. It is the consecutive repetition that allows you to experience a state of self-determination, willpower, and awareness. In the exercise, you only do what you said you will do. You say it, then you do it. You decide it, then you do it. This will also train your ability to decide and focus. The advanced variation of this exercise is to do the very same thing, announce things, and do them, but additionally notice moments of insecurity and subconscious or unintended behavior and actions, and to create these deliberately. So I'd say, I will go to the window. On the way to the window, I notice how I pull on my pants. This was an automatic action that was not announced. So I stop and deliberately, intentionally announce this action. I will now pull up my pants. Then I do intentionally. This frees up the subconscious behavior. Then I once again announce, I will now go to the window. I go to the window, but arriving at the window, I perhaps notice that I touched the window without having announced it. So I also deliberately announce and do that. I continue until there are no more automatic actions, reactions, and behavior within the exercise, and I feel in complete conscious control. There will also be phases where you're unsure on what to decide to do next. Relax into these until you've made a decision. The very advanced version of this exercise is to choose a habit you have on automatic, a habit you want to get rid of, then define the opposite of it, or what you want instead of that habit. Once you have the two sides of the issue, the bad habit, and what you want instead, you deliberately alternate between doing the old habit intentionally and the new preferred behavior. And you repeat both sides again and again and again until you have full conscious control over both sides and can simply decide what you want to do. This little miracle technique will eventually break any unwanted habit you have. Let's, for example, say that every time you speak publicly, you arrange your eyeglasses when you're nervous. Instead of that, you want to take in a good body position. So you'd like to exchange the habit nervously arranging eyeglasses with taking in a good body position. You definitely need something to do instead of the old habit. So, in this exercise, you'd hold a speech, either alone or for real, and you deliberately and intentionally arrange your eyeglasses. Then you deliberately and intentionally take in a good body posture. And you do both several times intentionally during your speech. And if you notice yourself touching your eyeglasses automatically, you do it again intentionally and then immediately switch to the good body posture. The habit will be broken after some repetitions. The reason this technique works so fantastically well is because unwanted habits can only be maintained if you are not fully aware of them. Let's take another example. Let's say you always switch on the TV every time you start feeling tired. So you ask yourself what you'd like to do instead of automatically turning on the TV when you feel tired. You come up with, okay, when I start feeling tired, I like to close my eyes for 5 minutes and take deep breaths. Or, okay, when I start feeling tired, I'd like to take a walk. Or every time that happens, I'd like to read a book from now on. So, in the days to come, you'd alternate between switching the TV on intentionally when you get tired and doing the other thing intentionally when you get tired. Soon, both behaviors will be under your conscious control, and you can simply choose what to do the next time you feel tired. Next, you can even apply the technique to getting tired itself. You realize, every time I talk about this subject on the phone, I get tired and so forth and so on. Being and doing. A friend once said to me, when something is happening, do nothing. When nothing is happening, do something. I love this phrase because it reflects the balance between being and doing. Someone else once told me, the basis of dynamic action is relaxation, and the basis of relaxation is dynamic action. And this is so true. If you can't relax properly, you won't be able to work properly. And if you can't work properly, you won't be able to relax properly. Because many people don't know how to fully identify with being and doing anymore. They have a bad conscience when they're being lazy or relaxing, thinking, oh, I'd have so much to do. I can't just be lazing around. And when they work, they think about relaxing or taking holidays. They neither fully relax nor fully work. I firmly believe you will increase your productivity and ability if you learn to fully relax and fully act. Fully relaxing means deep relaxation. While going to the sauna or the beauty studio or taking a walk or doing a short meditation or watching a movie will relax you a little bit. Deep relaxation can mean taking a full day's hike, going into a so-called flotation tank, or doing hours of meditation, or hours of massaging, or hours of being lazy. Really learn to relax fully deeply, and without any reservation or hesitation. When you have fully stopped doing, you will soon notice the rubber band that has been pulled to one side to boomerang to the other side, that you will be really, really keen on acting, working, moving. And when you work, how about try to work with full commitment and concentration, setting a day's plan of work and working so much that you are pleasantly exhausted at night and just fall into bed and immediately fall asleep. Like little children do it. Once they relax, they can be knocked out immediately and sleep deeply. And when they get excited, they can be active intensively. Learn both sides of the coin. Things you don't have to do. A common misconception of most people is that they have to take care of and do everything, control everything, micromanage everything. This is a fear-based concept of believing that life will go out of control and they can't trust anything to happen by itself. But realize, life will continue working just fine without you. And realize, many things that happen in your life happen by themselves, naturally, automatically. You do not have to control and do everything. You can trust others to do things. You can trust life to take care of things. You can trust synchronicity, which is another word for meaningful, universally orchestrated coincidence, to take care of things. There is an invisible energy orchestrating things. And there is a higher, invisible aspect of you who is bringing things into your life as well. There is a universal manager you can delegate desires to. This may be a new concept to you, but I recommend you try it out. Take out a sheet of paper and make 3 categories. Things I don't have to do that the universe will take care of for me. Things I want to do. Now, make those 2 lists, but allow the first list to be longer than the second one. Then put the list aside. The more you get used to this type of focus, the more you trust that many things will be taken care of by themselves. Simply because you allow them to, the more you will see evidence of this in your daily life. Planned action. 1. Write down a few things you want to achieve this week. Not things you want to do, but end results you want to achieve. 2. Write down why you want these things to happen. What are the emotional motivators? 3. Write down what you're going to do for these things to happen. Your action plan. 4. Write down when you're going to do each of these things. Assign certain times to them. If you're using this exercise for a team, group, or company, then assign each action to a certain person of the group. Now you have an action plan you can follow. This plan is not to be a corset that you must follow. It's to be an orientation. You can always move the dates of certain actions to later dates. You can always change the action plan. You can always change the goals. You can always act on new opportunities that come up. This type of plan is written for a focused orientation. Don't become slave to it by thinking you absolutely have to follow it the way it is written down. That's what stops most people from consciously planning in the first place. They believe if they don't follow through exactly as written down, they've somehow failed. So better not to plan in the first place. Plans are there to give you a general direction and a focus so that you have something to focus on in times you don't know what to focus on. Not as something that most occur in exactly that way. Some people will find this type of action planning very helpful. This exercise corresponds with the type 2 action mentioned earlier. Magical action. This exercise corresponds with the type 3 action, the acting as if something were already true. Take a piece of paper and on it, define a reality you would love to experience. Then, answer the following questions in written form. If this reality were already true, 1. What places would I be at? 2. What type of people would I meet? 3. How would I dress? 4. What body movements would I be doing? 5. What material objects and equipment would I be touching and handling? 6. How and what would I be conversing and talking about? 7. What interests would I have? 8. What would I be doing? 9. What other symbols and things correspond to this reality? Once you've answered these questions, you have a pretty good idea of what to do in order to synchronize your energy with the reality you say you want. Be courageous and demonstrate to yourself, others, and the universe who you are. Life reflects who you are, copying imagination into reality. This is the most powerful exercise when you're unsure of what the next steps are or want guidance and inspiration as to which way to go next. It is also a method to fish for new information from unconscious parts of your mind. You sit or lie down, Close your eyes and come to rest. Then you build up a feeling of peace, joy, or excitement within you. You don't need any reason to feel this joy. You just let that inner smile build up within you without using too many anchors or thoughts to do so. Then, feeling this joy or excitement, simply wait and observe what thoughts come up to that. What fantasies, images, and thoughts are attracted by that feeling. You take your time to daydream. Observe what kind of actions you see yourself taking in your imagination. Your imagination is not just some vague, dreamy thing. It is an informational tool that supports you in finding out your truest paths in life. After finishing this meditation, you write down all the actions you saw yourself taking in your imagination. These are actions you can copy into real life for the quickest and most positive results. Ask yourself, how can imitate these actions into real life? Let's, for example, say at your point of highest excitement, a vague picture of a person you knew a long time ago came up. You don't know why, but that's what came up when you went into the joy vibration. So, the action you could take is to contact that person, re-meet that person, even if you don't know why. If that's what imagination delivered to you, and if it felt good, that's exactly what to do. Trust that your higher self knows what to do, because it has the overview of many lives and existences, the overview of your complete life's plan. And it will feed you with information that you're not consciously aware of in this meditation. See what happens when you act upon what your joy tells you to act upon. I trust this information, and especially the application and repetitive exercising of it, will be useful to you for the rest of your life and even beyond. Remember, repetition is the mother of all skill. If you want to integrate a new philosophy or ability, then exercise it. Creativity. Do something you have done many times in a new and different way. Show 4 different ways to walk. Write down 4 different ways to reach a goal. Write down 4 different ways to have a relationship. Write down 4 different ways to do your job. Do something you can't do. Examples. I can't look at my body in the mirror and love it. Do it. I can't enjoy my poor balance sheet. Do it. I can't smile at everyone. Do it. I can't feel awake after only 3 hours of sleep. Do it. I can't work, watch the children, go shopping, and write this book in one day. Do it. I can't help you. Do it. I can't get myself to practice meditation. Do it. I can't talk about it with him. Do it. Change your surroundings. It is true that wherever you go, you take yourself with you. Therefore, it is advisable to change yourself first, before you change where you are. It is not about where you are, but who you are. You can be miserable or happy in any place, but it is not entirely counter-intentional to change your surroundings in order to change your state. Of course, your state does not change because you change your surroundings. It changes because you believe your surroundings affect you. As we've repeated many times, first comes the identity and its beliefs, then the factual world or surroundings. Changing your surroundings in order to change your mood and perspective is kind of doing it the complicated way, but it still works as long as you are immersed in the belief of an outside reality that is separate from you. In this sense, it can be beneficial to drive out of town occasionally. Fully conscious behavior. Doing any exercise in this book is a conscious, non-automatic, self-determined act. It is natural and all right to have many things in life run on automatic, outside of your aware control. But if the automatism gets too much, you turn from a player of the game into a pawn of the game and are no longer cause or source of much of anything. The following exercises are designed to be done occasionally to remind you of what it means to be pure awareness or conscious cause. Deliberate Act 1. A. Announce what you will do next. B. Do exactly that. C. Continue A and B until you are 100% conscious cause of every act and feel evidence of your free choice and will. If during this exercise you find yourself doing something you did not consciously announce, stop. Go back and deliberately announce what you did automatically, e.g. brushing hand through hair, before you continue the process. Deliberate Act 2. A. Write the day's plan, but only write down things you will really and certainly do. B. Do these things. C. What does it feel like to manifest what you intended 1-to-1? Deliberate thought. A. Choose what you will think next. B. Think that. C. Continue until full awareness is regained. This can already happen after a short time, and you notice you could be 100% cause over your thinking if you wanted to. Note, don't attempt to actually always be cause of your thinking. Life is much easier if you just let it flow. If you use this, then only when your thinking has become too automatic or rampant. Deliberate talk. A. Hold on before you say something and think about what you really want to say next. B. Say it. C. Continue until you have regained 100% causality over your speaking and realize that you are the prime source of your verbal expression. Deliberate feeling. A. Take a time planner and note what emotional state you wish to prioritize on each day of a week. Example: Monday, humor. Tuesday, appreciation. Wednesday, attentiveness. Thursday, inner peace. Friday, stability. You may also choose a day on which you deliberately practice a negative emotion you normally feel automatically. Survival actions. In order to survive in physical reality, there are only a few actions that are required. Breathe, drink, eat, digest, sleep, be healthy, dream. In order to function in physical reality and have a generally good time, most of the following actions are required. See, hear, smell, taste, touch. Think, feel, act, move, communicate. Dream, create, love. This may sound obvious to you, but it is mentioned because all these things are already given without you having to do anything to have them. There are a few exceptions of souls having incarnated and having removed one or two abilities. Society invalidates these disabilities when actually it is a training a soul puts on itself. Others intentionally impose restrictions, such as doing without eating. This only works if the body has become so light and etheric that it experiences physical reality differently. But in general, and for most people, these are the given abilities for every being. In your most natural and resistanceless state, all of these things come effortlessly. Is it not extraordinary that the most important things are already manifested? Any other additions are created by your beliefs. What you see, hear, say, etc. is based upon your beliefs about how reality works. But the tools themselves are your birthright. OceanoFPDF.com. 13 personal experiences in magic. I've read and heard of many accounts of magical experiences that go beyond the ordinary consensus of what most people call reality. But what was always the most important to me is not to know about them secondhand, but to experience them myself. In this chapter 1, we'll share some of my personal experiences, not as something I expect you, the reader, to also experience, but merely as a few examples from the trillions of experiences one can have as to inspire you to make your own experiences. While much of this book is based on technique, a few picturesque descriptions should help. While I've had hundreds of magical experiences in my life, I have chosen a few that seem significant and appropriate for this book. My experiences in magic and spiritual growth did not progress in a linear fashion of me getting more and more spiritual or more and more evolved. Linear thinking is not the way magic works. We are already infinite, multidimensional, and all-knowing beings, and therefore growth or progression is only an appearance. As quick as I may reach a high level or state of awareness, I may also lose it. And as quick as I lose it, I may also regain it. My most intense experiences, for example, did not take place in my adulthood after I had learned and practiced all these techniques. They took place when I was a child and a teenager. Some took place during periods in which I meditated regularly. Some took place in periods in which I was leading a normal life. Not all of my life is magical in the sense of phenomena outside of the consensus reality. In fact, the experiences wouldn't be as exciting in contrast would I not also be leading the normal life. Sometimes I have allowed years to pass before having the next big hit, but I have also noticed that labeling these experiences as unusual or extrasensory or higher or miraculous or even magical will make them so rare jewels of surprise. So, if you wish to experience more magic in your life, you might want to loosen the definition that you are a small human being experiencing something huge, strange, or weird. Ever notice how people label these things far out and unbelievable? when they occur. Declaring them as strangers rather than every friends makes them rare. Viewing miracles as a common occurrence makes them a common occurrence. The blue-skinned people. The most magical experience of my childhood involved night dreams I had, which were more real and intense than so-called reality. When the dreams you have at night are more vivid, emotional, and real than anything you experience in waking life, it is a truly consciousness restructuring experience. In my dreams, in fact, I recalled waking life as having the dreamlike quality, not the other way around. My dreams mostly involved alien beings from other planets and dimensions. In earlier childhood, these were nightmares of being abducted and abused. But from the age of 7 to about the age of 12, I experienced the most beautiful encounters with a blue-skinned race that were not only in another star system, but also on another dimensional or vibratory level. These blue-skinned beings looked similar to humans. Many of them had negroid features, lips and hair, but their skin was a beautiful indigo blue. Their character was highly humorous, witty, and compassionate. I encountered them on a regular basis where they received me on their planet, which I recall having an overdose of oxygen. This high level of oxygen made everything seem lightweight and hilarious. They received me as one of their own who has somehow gone astray. In the first of hundreds of meetings, they would make fun of me for being so serious, sad, angry, or boring in my human incarnation. I would always awake feeling elated, very powerful, and with tears of joy in my eyes. The level of sophistication of instruction was beyond anything I had subsequently learned on Earth, but I was rarely able to bring all the information over to waking life. While the feeling of elation and the memory of the blue beings remained throughout the day, the knowledge discussed often stayed hidden on sub-aware levels. The things I did remember, though, drove me to seek out science fiction literature in bookstores as an 8-year-old child. I was looking for an explanation of what was happening to me, and the first time my eyes fell on science fiction in a bookstore, I wouldn't stop reading it. Soon thereafter, science fiction movies started, and at the age of 12, I read ancient astronaut books on how the gods were aliens. While all these confirmed what I already knew, it didn't come close to the knowledge I intuitively knew I had gained during sleep. I was taught that I had never incarnated on Earth, something I didn't quite understand as a child, but clearly understand today, and explains why I felt quite alienated on Earth as a child. The blue-skinned beings told me that what we were doing, me being shown this information, would constitute cheating by earthly standards. I was taught about many different races of beings and many different types of existences. Some of what I was taught by my blue friends has been integrated into this book. The contrast to what I had learned on this plane and what I was taught in school did cause problems, however. Although I ever spoke about any of my encounters, I couldn't take my education too seriously. It started with me questioning my teachers and their curriculum. After getting harsh responses, it continued with me no longer paying attention in school and finally getting kicked out of various schools for disobeying. Today, I understand that my rebellion was unnecessary, a reality I created myself. But without, I would not be where I am today, with more money, knowledge, and joy than most people who did not get kicked out of school have. Getting kicked out does not mean I remained uneducated. My room at my parents' house stocked more books than the local library. Friends would make fun of me for having that many books. But from a certain point on, I decided to educate myself than have so-called authorities tell me what reality is supposedly all about. Reality isn't even remotely like anything my teachers and parents or the media taught me. I thank my blue-skinned friends who remain invisible since my childhood for the alternative education. Enlightenment. At the age of 14, I experienced a state that only a decade later I would learn is called enlightenment. It was again within a sleeping dream state. I had been reading about and experimenting with the concept of lucid dreams, dreaming while consciously being aware that you're dreaming. One evening I lie down and focused on one single image, determined to focus on it for hours or until I fell asleep. I did end up being able to focus on the image, a white star, for hours. But I did not fall asleep in the traditional sense. I fell into my enlightenment experience. I entered an incredibly vast space full of stars. I felt paradoxical, On the one hand, I was within the universe. On the other hand, I felt as the universe. My 14-year-old mind was still intact and had difficulty conceptualizing the experience. "Oh my God," it whispered. "I am God," it then whispered. Not in a blasphemous sense, but in a tone of slight shock. "I am God," the 14-year-old kept whispering. Suddenly, some earthly conditioning kicked in. Well, not the God, but a God. A phrase I would years later re-encounter in my, at that time, favorite movie, Groundhog Day. I float through this space, and all polarities merged. I didn't know who I was where I was, but I felt more blissful and happy than ever before. The feeling of happiness grew so intense that it felt like it was going to explode. It was the most unimaginably intense experience I've had up to now in this lifetime. I woke up the next morning, but even in my waking life, things were different. Everything seemed more fluid and bright, and I had difficulty articulating who I am. I walked around in a near identityless state for a few days, feeling high as a kite. Although I hadn't taken any drugs up to that age, I realized that I was in a state that some would label as drugged. A rush of energy kept pulsating through my body, giving me thousands of variations on happiness. On the third day of my trip, I recall placing my hand on a girl's head and healing her headache. I didn't consciously know I could do that, I just did it out of an impulse. It was only after about a week that I started coming down again and reassembling my identity and beliefs. I witnessed firsthand how identity and beliefs are created. Thoughts moved by my minds, I like in vivid slow motion. Although I did not have the intellectual knowledge of what had happened to me, I did have an intuitive understanding of what was going on and did not feel as strange as others describing the non-conceptual experience might have. After this experience, I lost a large chunk of fear related to the issues of death and powerlessness. Healing the hard way. At the age of 24, I had read a lot on the issue of healing oneself. It's not that I had many experiences with bad health. The last doctor's visit I remembered was back in my childhood. On some level, I always believed the body would take care of itself, which it actually does when not interfered with by you. But there was a condition which I couldn't seem to get rid of, a nearly constant pressure in my forehead. Sometimes this pressure manifested as a headache. Sometimes it was simply a dull pressure around the area of the third eye. Often I didn't even notice it, not because it was gone, but because it was such a constant normalcy of my everyday life. As I allowed myself to become more aware, I realized how my cigarette smoking and coffee drinking was related to wanting to relieve myself from this enduring pressure. I tried out various methods, and they did not work. Magical techniques not working was new to me because they had helped me many times before. So, my second step was to the doctors, but they couldn't help me either. Back then, I was planning to visit a Caribbean island with a friend of mine, but I had a second agenda. I told myself I would not return from the trip until that pressure, sometimes pain in my forehead, was healed. That was a vow I gave to myself. No matter how long it took, I would return a healed man. Back then, I used a technique of willpower, which I no longer use today. It involved repeating a desired reality as an affirmation over and over and over and over again, while alternating that by verbally exaggerating any doubts, second thoughts, or buts and objections I had about it. I was intent on applying this method until it worked. Today, I would probably not use this method because it puts ego will over the will of the infinite self, because it's an overpowering rather than an allowing. It is healing the hard way, and more effective results can be attained by without ego willfulness. But in emergency situations, it will always work with enough repetitions. Not because the method is especially effective, but because your unbending creates a belief that makes it so. It is belief in the technique that makes it work. On the third day of our trip, I had a fight with my travel partner, and we went separate ways for a few days. No coincidence, of course. That same day, I spent feeling sad and remorseful about the situation with my girlfriend until I realized this to be the opportunity to start my healing. I walked for several hours barefoot along the beach, voicing my affirmation and exaggerating the doubts, as the technique prescribed. On that day, I must have spoken the phrase, "my forehead feels free, light and good," at least 10,000 times. But on that day, nothing much changed, except for the pleasant mind stillness that accompanies repetitive mantras. I arrived at my hotel room. My girlfriend was not present, so I simply went to sleep. On the next morning, she had left the room before I woke up. I got up, had some breakfast, and vowed to continue my exercise with no breaks save for lunch and restroom visits. And on it went. By midday, another 1,000 of the same affirmations lay behind me, still with no change. Of course, I continued, for the whole exercise is based on true persistence through willpower. My word was to win in the end. I virtually ignored all the bikini beauties, steadfastly focused on my healing. In the afternoon, the doubts and counterbeliefs I was supposed to voice started running out, so I continued with the affirmation, only voicing counterbeliefs occasionally. But still the pressure in my forehead remained, sometimes to a lesser to extent, sometimes more feelable, but never could I coax myself into believing it had disappeared, although I did try a few times. Oftentimes in these hours I had the hope of, is it working now? Is it happening? But the results weren't even near what I'd come here for. Occasionally I would shed a tear for the relationship that seemed to be gliding out of my experience. After dinner, I continued my affirmation walk along the beach, walking way out of bounds of not only the village we were staying at, but outside of any place that seemed safe for tourists. The lights of hotels lay far behind me. In front of me, the beach looked wilder, the jungle denser. It was around this time a shift began happening, but to the worse. I was entering the dark night of the soul. I couldn't see too much, so my mind started projecting paranoid fears of giant spiders, scorpions, and crabs crawling in the sand, or of colorful but viscous snakes hanging out of trees, ready to snap at me and kill me on the spot. Or cannibals rushing out of the woods to invite me to my last meal. My body was covered in cold sweat. My fear grew to such an intensity that a few times I felt unable to voice my affirmation. My voice became shaky and thin. According to this ancient shaman technique I was using, there was no giving up, and anything that came up inside me or outside me was to be treated as a counterbelief. So I started exaggerating the fear. Suddenly the pressure in the head got worse, turned into real pain. In fact, it was pumping with pain. But there was still something within me that rejoiced over the change. Anything different is good, I told myself. Before something gets better, it can sometimes get worse. Noticing how I was approaching a village that didn't seem like any tourist village, I decided to return the way I came. And in returning, I soon began to notice the lights of the tourist village. This soothed my fear sufficiently. I arrived back at the hotel after about 6 hours of walking and with one of the worst headaches of my life. The headache was screaming at me to give up the exercise, but I was intent on following through, labeling the pain as a test to see how easy I would give up. My girlfriend lay in bed sleeping. She had put a note on the table telling me, "Can we talk in the morning?" I wrote back, "Sure," and lied down beside her, looking at her sleep for a few moments before going to the receptionist to get some aspirin. Am I cheating? My disciplined self asked while I popped the pill. But the urge for survival does sometimes encompass the will of the ego. In the morning, me and my girlfriend woke up arm in arm, as if nothing had ever changed between us. "I missed you," she whispered. We had the most beautiful sexual experience we had ever had up to then. Funnily, right after sex, we tried to settle our differences, which led to the same thing we were fighting over the other day to erupt again. She finally left the room, slamming the door behind her. I continued my session the same day, repeating my mantra over and over and over. The pain actually increased. This time I would not take another aspirin, but simply allow the pain to be part of the exercise. It did indeed feel as if something were breaking apart in my forehead, and I would allow this to happen. Finally, in the afternoon of the third day of exercise, something did very obviously break open in my forehead. It felt like my head cracking up. Something was freed. I sat at a cafe table in silent astonishment. Just a few seconds ago, I was sitting there whispering my affirmation as not to arouse attention, and suddenly, without me expecting it, it started working. A feeling that I had never experienced before flowed through my forehead. It felt like a supernova of lightness and tranquility and coolness burst forth from my forehead, like my third eye were opening to another dimension. I sat there watching the unfolding of this process. I had quit affirming by now and just let it happen. I knew it was over. I knew it was healed. The pressure cracked open that day and never returned again since that hot summer day at the beach. I had healed something that had been following me since my childhood within 3 days. Some might wonder about the persistence with which I kept at it. But what are 3 days and a little bit of pain compared to decades? Nothing really. My self-confidence or the confidence in my power were at a maximum that day and the weeks thereafter. Also, after the exercise, I did not speculate or worry that the issue might return. The experience of the pressure cracking open an array of energy emanating from my forehead were too obvious to not recognize the event as the healing. Had doubts returned, I would have simply continued the exercise. Healing the quick way. The same evening, I was scheduled to have an important meeting with a company who wanted to book me as a coach. For me, this would mean working for only 4 weeks and earning money that could carry me through the rest of the year if I were to decide to quit working. I decided to take my bicycle to the grocery store that afternoon. On my way there, my bicycle brakes stopped working and I fell on the concrete and broke my finger. My elbow on my right hand was bleeding. The bone of the small finger of my right hand had obviously snapped and broken, the bone hanging loosely out of the flesh. It was a sickening sight and the pain was nearly unbearable. I don't know how I did it, but something within me protested. This can't be happening because I have an important meeting later on. No way. This did not happen. I stood up as if nothing had happened and walked back home, intently focused on nothing ever having happened. When I arrived back home, my little finger was still swollen and cut and still aching, but the bone was no longer broken. I continued with my tasks, ordering something to eat by home delivery and still insisting that nothing ever happened. I did not tend to the wounds, did not take care of anything concerning the accident, because nothing ever happened. I will go to this meeting tonight, feeling refreshed and well. Nothing ever happened. 15 minutes later, the swelling had disappeared. The cut had disappeared. There was no sign of anything having ever happened. The finger was not only completely healed, it really looked like nothing ever happened in the first place. I had reversed a cause and effect process. Lucky with expensive courses. Back in the days I was usually short on money, I would always be incredibly lucky when it came to expensive seminars in the metaphysical and motivational coaching field. Lucky breaks happened to me several times in this context. In the year 2002, I considered taking part in a course called Life and Enterprise Management, my world-famous coach Anthony Robbins. This course would be held on the Fiji Islands, and the course, plus flight from Europe, plus accommodation would cost me about $25,000. Unfortunately, my bank account showed $1,000 in the minus. Nevertheless, I addressed my higher self with the intent of taking part in a good course on some faraway and exotic island. The funny thing was that I had just recently returned from another expensive metaphysical course, which had cost me $14,000. It was called the Avatar Wizard course and had taken place in Orlando, Florida. Since I had also gotten the means to pay the course and travel expenses by magical means, I figured I could do it again. Intent on visiting that Florida course, I had suddenly gotten an offer to translate the franchise book of a company from German to English. I agreed to do it. In order to get the money in time, I did the whole translation within a week and received $10,000 for it. Not bad for someone who was normally making $3,000 a month previously. Anyway, right after that course came the idea to visit another one. The week after placing my intention, I held an English course. Asking my students why they were learning English, they answered, "Because we want to attend an Anthony Robbins seminar on Fiji soon." I recognized this event as something I had called forth. Sure enough, at the end of the week, my English students asked me to accompany them to the seminar event as their translator. I would get the course for free, accommodation for free. I'd only have to pay for the flight myself. Fantastic. There it was, manifested within a week. Living in Munich, Germany, I went to the travel agency to find out what tickets to Fiji would cost, and my heart sank. Anything from $10,000 to $15,000. Cheaper flights were supposedly not available at the time. Are they crazy? I thought to myself. I had mind manifested my desire to visit that course. I would be getting it all for free, And here was evidence that I could not afford the flight, which was as much or more as the whole course cost. But I remained intent on finding a way. Soon thereafter, I had the idea to surf the internet for flights. I had the idea to fly to Los Angeles and book my flight to Fiji from Los Angeles. And this worked out well. I ended up paying $800 for a two-way ticket to LA and $1,000 for a last-minute flight from LA to Fiji. Sound incredible? Not if the whole universe is on your side. On my first day at the seminar, I translated for the group of Germans. But already on the second day, they told me they would no longer require translation and that I could stay to enjoy the course. Which I did, for free. Near the end of the very same year, I desired to do yet another metaphysical course in Hawaii. And once again, it seemed that I did not have the financial means to do it. And once again, the universe proved to me that one doesn't need any money to manifest whatever one wants. I got a call from someone who wanted to book me on an English course. But he didn't want to do it in Munich or London, where I usually do such courses. He wanted to combine it with a trip to Hawaii. He would like to stay there for 4 weeks, of which I would be his teacher for 3 weeks. What a coincidence that I could arrange for the one free week to be the week in which the course takes place. I practically got paid to travel to Hawaii, and I got paid for the week of vacation as well. The course cost a fraction of what I made there myself. I report these events as they all took place in the same year of 2002, and they all involved getting expensive things for free. Meanwhile, I am in the beautiful position of no longer having to rely on money miracles to occur, but it was magic that got me in this position as well. Time slipped. I've had many occurrences in which time revealed itself to be much more fluid and malleable than our rigid linear conceptions hint at. But the most intense of all happened to me on the island of Malta. I was listening to a recording apparently featured extra low frequency waves behind a background of white noise. I was supposed to listen to it for 1 hour in order to synchronize the hemispheres of my brain. But I had fallen asleep while listening and had the CD player on auto repeat. After many hours of the white noise coming through the headphones, I was in a peculiar state between waking and sleeping and got the strangest sensation. That of my mind or energy rotating quicker and quicker and quicker. The rotation continuously sped up and was accompanied by a high-pitched tone. I had the feeling of leaving my body or of not being properly attached to my body. I removed the headphones, turned to the CD player, and reoriented myself in the hotel room. It was a sunny day outside. This was quite strange because I had started my exercise at 10 p.m. when it was already getting dark. Had I really slept all night? I felt disoriented and spaced out and wanted to take a shower in order to get grounded. Back then I did not wear a wristwatch, but the alarm clock in the bedroom should 3 o'clock. My expectation was that this should be 3 a.m., but it must have been 3 p.m. because it was sunny and hot daylight outside. I went down to the reception desk to verify the time, and indeed it was 3 in the afternoon. But I could hardly grasp how I could have slept all night and a large part of the next day without having noticed. As far as I was concerned, I was only dozing 3 hours or so, and I did not believe that my earphones could have remained on my ears for 17 hours straight, or even my nearly used-up batteries last that long. Confusion welled up in my mind. I stepped outside into a temperature way above the comfort zone I was accustomed to. The thermometer read 40 degrees Celsius. I walked around in a daze, gradually trying to accept that I had slept 17 hours straight. It then suddenly hit me that I must have missed an appointment for lunch that day. I had gotten to know a French woman a few days before and had arranged to meet her for lunch today. So I phoned her apologizing for missing the date. But she responded in her French accent, "Oh no, 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 no. It's okay. Our meeting is tomorrow." Tomorrow? I accepted the schedule, thinking I had misunderstood our date's timing. Later on in the day, while reading the day's newspaper to a cup of coffee, I had a realization in the classical sense of a character in a science fiction movie. I was reading the same newspaper I had read yesterday. Asking the waiter if they had today's newspaper, he told me, "I am holding today's newspaper and that they throw away newspapers from previous days." I looked at the day, and it was Tuesday, although in my mind it was supposed to be Wednesday. As far as I was concerned, I had started my C to White Noisy LF meditation on Tuesday, at 10 p.m. Now I was sitting here, and it was Tuesday all over again. Had I time traveled? Had I actually really time traveled? Had my childhood's dream come true without me even being fully aware, let alone appreciative of it? I racked my brains for other explanations. Maybe it had been Monday, and I only thought it was Tuesday. It was my mistake for sure. But feeling more and more confused, I had to know for certain. I retraced my days. Sunday, I definitely remember because all the shops were closed and I had a drink out of the minibar of the hotel. And it was on Sunday that I told myself I would go paragliding above the ocean. And it was on Sunday I looked up various offers on paragliding. And it was on Monday I actually went paragliding. I know it was Monday because that's when I went paragliding and all the shops were open again. I went with a friend of mine who was shaking with fear of heights while acting as if everything was okay. Yes, that was Monday. It was Monday because it felt unique to not begin a working week on Monday, but rather continue lazy island life. I'd done a seminar on Malta the week before. I traced Monday into the evening. I recall spending time at the beach with my French acquaintance. That's when we arranged to meet on Wednesday for lunch. That's also when I decided that I would do meditation on Tuesday evening, the evening spent without her. There was no meditation Monday evening. I was with her. I woke up on Tuesday and spent much of the time idly hanging around at the hotel pool, reading. Later, I retreat to my room to do some writing on my laptop. And then, at around 10 p.m., I started using the sound CD to meditate. I recall falling asleep after about 40 minutes of it, and then waking up to daylight, not on Wednesday, but on Tuesday. There was now no doubt in my mind that I had time traveled. So, being on Tuesday again, shouldn't I be seeing the other version of myself on that day? But I didn't. That other Tuesday was taking place in a parallel universe. I spent the rest of the day in a pleasant daze over the accomplishment of time travel. Split reality. An entirely different sort of parallel reality experience occurred when I had two realities that apparently don't match playing out simultaneously without bothering each other. Rather than the two parallel realities having to be experienced separately, they took place at the same time and place. This was so baffling I will recount the story here. When I was younger, I understood nothing of what you do unto others, you do unto yourself. And so this event found my having sex with a girlfriend of a guy whose party we were invited to. I didn't know too much about the guy, except that he was a jealous type and would certainly beat the living daylights out of me if he were to see me in bed with his girlfriend. Also, I probably wouldn't be there had me and her not been slightly drunk and secretly admiring each other at the party. What about your boyfriend? He could come at any time. I half-heartedly mumbled a few times. If you don't worry about it, it's not going to happen, she told me. In retrospect, she told me something I would later teach others. But on a deeper level, I did worry. As we were in the middle of the act, her boyfriend knocked on the door. "Tammy, are you in there?" My heart sank. Tammy, seemed to be in such a rush of arousal that she didn't even notice it. "It's your boyfriend," I urged. She ignored. Looking back today, I still don't understand why I did what I did then. I said to myself, what the heck? If I don't worry, nothing is going to happen. Who says he is going to enter the room? Who says he will be angry? Who says this is still his girlfriend? Uncharacteristically, I let go of all worry and gave myself to the experience to Tamara. Her boyfriend did enter the room, and we continued as if he weren't there. It was a magical moment because he didn't even notice us. "Oh, excuse me," he muttered, as if we were someone else. While Tamara and my body were interlocked, we watched her boyfriend walk around the room in a kind of hypnotic daze. "Tam," he called. He opened the closet, apparently looking for her in there. It was as if he could not believe that Tamara and me would be in bed together and therefore did not see it. A friend of his also entered the room and didn't notice us lying there either, or if he did notice us, he didn't notice who we were. But it got even spookier. The boyfriend, obviously unaware of us, said to his friend standing at the door, "I have a bad feeling about this. I have a feeling she was drunk and went off with some guy." Tamara, meanwhile, was behaving even more strange. She continued to kiss and caress me as if we were alone in the room. Looking at the incident in retrospect, Tamara was behaving like some kind of witch who was in the know or knew something about reality splitting that I didn't. The two boys left the room again, in search of their tomorrow. 2 hours later, the party was coming to an end. People started leaving. I got dressed and joined the party group, still somewhat insecure as to what would happen. Would her boyfriend approach me when I'm alone? I half expected it, but none of that happened. I was treated as if I had never been away from the party. Her boyfriend took little note of me, just like before the incident. As far as I know, Damara had never been asked about the incident. The Hollywood experiment. I had a phase not too long ago where I found myself at a point of actually having achieved everything I set out to do. I had run out of desires. I was professionally working as a coach on exactly the topics I wanted. I had exactly the relationship and type of partner I wanted. I was making more than the money I wanted. I was having the spiritual experiences I wanted. Having achieved this much by the age of 30, I began thinking in the lines of if all this is possible, what else is? I also wanted to know how far I could take my techniques and knowledge before I published them for readers. This was when I began toying with the idea of becoming a famous movie star. Before the ultimate breakthrough came, I did break off the project because I realized that fame and attention was not something I really wanted, but something I was merely toying with to see how my reality creation technique worked. But I will report how easy it was to get into the vibe of it, because I know there are many readers out there who don't believe such things are easy or even possible for them. I began by physicalizing my desire. I drove my car to nearby film studios every day as if I had a job to do there. I started reading books written by Hollywood insiders and stars. I started writing a book on how to become a star. I started registering at various casting agencies. It was merely 2 weeks after I'd started my Hollywood project that I got 3 jobs in front of a camera. 2 for advertisement and 1 for a TV movie in which I played the main role. At castings and in waiting rooms on film sets, I listened to the lame stories of actors on how hard it was to get jobs, how they'd been trying since years, and how little money they make. I clearly saw that they had bought into a belief I was naively free of, as I was a beginner in the scene and knew my reality creation. I also found out that for the movie role, the other actors with main parts were making only a small part of the money I was making. I don't wish to brag here, but it's really only all about beliefs and definitions of what is real. In order to physicalize even deeper, I traveled across the ocean to Los Angeles and stayed there for a few weeks, further identifying myself with the scene. Upon returning after 2 months, I detected the belief, well, here in Europe you're not going to get anywhere near stardom. A friend of mine confirmed to me, you gotta live within 50 miles of Los Angeles, otherwise you're out. Upon noticing this limiting belief, I dismissed it and reinstated my desired self. 1 week after returning from LA, a television moderator called me, telling me he would be interviewing Hollywood stars and was nervous about his English. Could I coach him in English? Could I prepare him for his work with superstars? I said yes. I soon found out that I was coaching a guy that would be talking to the big players, Steven Spielberg, Tom Cruise, Angelina Jolie, and so forth. Remember, all of this started happening only 3 months after beginning the Hollywood creation. There are a few other encounters that happened which took me further up the ladder, but I cannot disclose them here in protection of the celebrity's privacy. I soon realized that I was going towards my desired creation at breakneck speed, and I would finally have to decide if I really wanted it. Looking deep within, I realized that stardom wasn't like anything that I wanted. I love a certain amount of anonymity, and an acting career isn't exactly anonymous. I so much prefer the peaceful realm of creative writing alone in my home at my laptop than sitting around a noisy film set surrounded by other people's verbalized thoughts. And thus, I abandoned the project and turned it into this paragraph that I would share with all people who think it's in any way difficult to enter any parallel reality. Shocked by the manifestation. Since my experiences with the blue-skinned people in childhood, I had always had the romantic desire to have a close encounter with a being from outside of this planet or dimension. I also desired to see a UFO for real. This romantic desire was with me for a long time until I finally realized, hey, wait a minute. You have all these RC tools. Why don't you just attract that experience? It was a few minutes later that I realized that I had been keeping the experience at bay as some distant romantic desire, because I was actually afraid of the experience. A rush of fear swept through me the moment I understood that the experience was actually available to me. I interpreted my fear as having had too much input on negative scenarios of aliens as popularized in literature and movies. I identified with the version of myself that perceives UFOs of extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional origins and let go. The moment I ended the exercise and opened my eyes again, something immediate and unusual happened. The air suddenly smelled as if something were burnt. I couldn't locate the source of the smell because it was all around and intuitively concluded that it had something to do with my reality shift. The days after the shift did seem different in many ways. I was feeling uneasy for reasons I couldn't explain. I would later come to understand that this had something to do with the fact that I still held beliefs on evil forces and also with the fact that my desired encounter was on a bit of a higher vibratory level than I was currently residing in. In the weeks after the shift, nothing happened and my unease began residing. I started forgetting about the whole issue and put my attention on other things. As is typical for RC, this is when things started to happen after really having let go. I was lying in bed one night, nearly asleep when a bright flash into my bedroom had me open my eyes again. I looked around but saw nothing. Then, to my shock, I saw something that looked like a star in the sky, except it was pulsing or flashing, as if to get my attention. And as it moved closer, I could discern it from the stars. It wasn't a star at all, but some aircraft hovering in mid-air, glowing pulses of different, soft light colors in my direction. On one level, I understood it was benign, but on my most aware level, a lie in bed shocked, unwilling to move, scared. Another rush of fear through my body. The light ball was slowly pulsing, indicating that it was there. But I only thought, look guys, this might be too early. I am not ready for this, please. As soon as I had thought the thoughts, the ball disappeared or flew away. I'm not sure which. I had enough relief to at least start breathing again normally, but I was still somewhat tense. My heart was still beating faster than usual, and my hair stood from my neck. Finally, after sitting up in bed for about 10 minutes, I relaxed. What was that all about? I thought, not meaning the aircraft, but my reaction. Something I desired all my life. Then it is happening and I want it to go away. My relief turned into remorse. And my remorse turned into the resolve that next time I would do better. In a dream I had that night, I was prompted to travel to a place called Königssee, a lake crossing the border from Germany to Austria. Having plenty of experience in RC, this is exactly what I did the next morning. I called off my appointments and went on a 180-mile drive to that lake. Once I entered the region, it started raining, which is somewhat typical for that place. While in the car, my attention was once again caught by the light ball in the sky. It was again hovering there and flashing at me. This time there could be no mistake that it wasn't a star because it was in broad daylight. Although I had intended to react differently than last time, fear crept up my body again. My heart started racing, cold sweat on my forehead. Here I was in one of the most mystical and beautiful landscapes of the planet, witnessing an unworldly aircraft, and I wasn't enjoying it at all. "Slow down, guys," I whispered. The ball disappeared. Arriving at the lake, there was no sight of the light ball. Fortunately, because it was raining, there were hardly any tourists either. The lake itself winds its way alongside mountains. One side of it is German territory, the other side borders on Austrian territory. I had been here a few times before because I have a special connection to the lake. I had come here to meditate. I got on one of the tourist boats, which would drop me off at a stop that was somewhat more remote. Somehow I was afraid of doing even this, because I understood that the more remote, the more likely my visitors from up there would reappear. But I had made up my mind. I most definitely did not want them to get any closer. The thought of it was terrifying. This, of course, contradicted all my apparent desires and taught me that sometimes what we desire, we actually fear. I got off at a stop which featured a lone chapel and a restaurant and walked a path I was familiar with. I was nervous because everything in me knew that I was walking towards my encounter. The dream had been a message, prompting me here. And sure enough, as I turned the corner, there it was, bigger, closer, more impressive. A glowing orb the size of a hot air balloon and of various changing colors. Not a flying disc, but a glowing orb. It did not look technical or silvery like my mind had expected, but a bit more like a living energy or a sort of fluid. I took a few deep breaths. I was still afraid, but seeing it close up did not heighten my fear as I thought it would. It seemed to be emanating some calming effect. Wow, Okowo. I whispered. Thanks for showing up, I stated coyly. The telepathic communication that was then transferred as a voice right into my mind was unexpected. You call upon us with no purpose, except for personal entertainment and to ease your own doubts. Next time, come with a purpose. I stood there, surprised at the frank and earthly or reasonable sounding message. But I understood the message. What did I expect? Some grand revelation about the destiny of humanity? I thought about asking, who are you, but didn't. Somehow I understand that who they were wouldn't make much sense to me and wasn't as important compared to who I was being at the moment anyway. I looked around to see if anyone else was witnessing this remarkable event, while the orb merely hovered in the air. It did flow a rush of a specific type of well-being into me, a type I can't remember ever having felt a liquid well-being, and then it ascended and vanished. I was changed. I walked around the area stunned and feeling the liquid energy flow through my body and being like some kind of super fuel I had obtained. I traveled back to the shore and then back home in amazed silence and crystal clarity, following the pearl necklace. There were some times I would follow the pearl necklace of higher self. That means I would let go of all plans, expectations, and goals and simply look at what option in the here and now excites me the most. Then I would do it, follow that shining light until it shone no more. Then I would take stock in a new here and now and see what option shines the brightest now. And I would follow that until the energy of the option was used. Then I would take stock, see what options I have in a new here and now, choose the one that seemed most interesting, joyful, or exciting, and follow that. In behaving like this, I was following a pearl necklace my higher self laid out for me, following a path my soul would enjoy. The options that are most interesting or exciting in any given moment are not always in alignment with the ego's concerns, which is why it can take some courage. But following the intuitive path of higher self always results in the highest forms of joy, surprise, and adventure. One of the most remarkable times I did this was at the age of 28. I was hanging around at home, bored to tears and disillusioned at how unfulfilling all the security and comfort I had amassed were. I wished to go into the unknown. This was an option my soul found exciting. Without even further hesitation, I packed the 2 pairs of jeans and some shirts into a backpack and headed straight to the airport, not yet knowing where I was going. I would decide which flight to take when I got there. Immediately, my mood elevated. I had broken the routine of everyday life and was heading into the unknown. Some adventurers might criticize that my credit card offered me all the security I needed, but I had already experienced the world traveling without money when I was a teenager. It wasn't world traveling without money I was after. I simply wished to follow the pearl necklace of higher self and act on the impulses my soul sent me. Higher self, the higher aspect of myself, knew that I was in sync with it and began guiding me. Arriving at the airport, I had hundreds of options of where to fly. But only while looking at the city of Oslo, Norway, did my soul signal yes. It did this by producing a tingling sensation on top of my head, crown chakra. So a flight to Oslo I booked. I had never been there, didn't know anyone there, had not reserved a place there. But being on the flow of higher self, everything one needs is automatically provided. It sometimes saddens me to see how far people have strayed from their inner authority and power, from their inner coach, higher self. How fearful and afraid they are of the unknown, having to pre-plan and strategize every single move they make. And when anything unexpected happens, instead of enjoying it, they nearly have a nervous breakdown. The universe really does provide, effortlessly and efficiently. Once on the flow of higher self, an array of new options and coincidences, synchronicities, pop up. As on my flight to Oslo, when I found out I am sitting beside a book author I had always admired. I did not recognize him at first because I had never seen his picture, only read his books. We quickly got into small talk. I told him I write books, and he told me he does too. I write metaphysical books. He writes for the intellectual. I couldn't have been more pleased by the flight. Landing in Oslo, I took the airport train to the city of Oslo. I spent the day walking around there aimlessly but blissfully, chose a hotel at random, fell asleep. My night dream gave me a clear indicator of where to go next. To make a long journey shorter, I continued through Norway by exploring the fjords. In the presence of their magnificent beauty, my mind got even quieter and the connection to higher self grew stronger. I would soon fly from Oslo to Cairo, Egypt. The reason for this was that the topic of Egypt confronted me 3 times in one single day. In a boat I was on, someone had left a travel book on Egypt lying on a seat. I find an Egypt travel book in Norway, of all places. Later that day, I struck up a conversation with an American tourist who admired Norway, but also kept mentioning, for no apparent reason, how I ought to see Egypt. Finally, when checking my emails in the evening, the first email I opened was an advertisement invitation to Egypt. The message was clear. Get to Egypt. Landing in Hurghada, Egypt, a typical tourist resort town, with an American passport and no specific destination was a bit complicated. The authorities seemed to have an urgent need to know where I would be going, but I didn't know where I was going. They also seemed to have the urgent need to have me be part of some kind of tourist group or diving group or all-inclusive vacation group, but I wasn't. I was a lone traveler without destination. They finally released me, and I went where I noticed most other people going, to the largest castle-like hotel in the tourist town of Hurghada. Resting there for a few days, I had 2 options that excited me: go diving or visit the pyramids in Cairo, which I had never seen. The urge to visit the pyramids won over, and I joined a bus tour to Cairo, not yet knowing that the travel time would be 8 hours through empty deserts. From the instructions I had received as a child, I realized that ancient Egypt was connected to high technology and alien or interdimensional beings. I understood that the pyramids were not built by normal means as taught in history class. I was peripherally aware of books making the same claims, but I never needed to read these books to know what had been shown to me when I was a child. And I realized I would gain flashbacks of my memories by visiting these sites. Cairo came as a shock to me after the clean, shining, rich textures and infrastructure of Norway. It appeared that the current civilization was on a lower level than a civilization that had lived here thousands of years ago. The city dirty, loud and vast, but in the distance I could see the majestic pyramids hovering above the city. Despite the distraction by hundreds of beggars asking me for money, I did have the flashbacks I sensed I would have. As the beggars started getting on my nerves, and when I no longer had any small change to give them, I started running after them, acting like I am begging them for money. This amusing maneuver quickly changed their attitude. The flashbacks came as intense visions I had, visions that differed from normal thoughts or daytime fantasies. But what they displayed to me were a bit eerie because they were so foreign to what humanity is all about today. I understood that the ancient Egyptian civilization did not have much in common with the human journey of today. I made notes in a diary, and someday I intend to incorporate my spiritually channeled insights in a book. Hanging around in Egypt, I became restless. My ego mind wanted more. It longed for more hard evidence of alien visitation. But no matter how hard I tried, I wasn't given this evidence, not yet. The reason is simple. We can only perceive what we are the vibratory match of. There could be swarms of flying discs hovering above me, but as long as I didn't believe I could see them, I wouldn't. I started noticing the beliefs that were actually there. Everybody wants hard evidence, but nobody gets it. Why should I be the one to get it? Needing hard evidence equals disbelief, and so on. At this point, I had even forgotten my earlier experience with the flying orbs of the mountain lake. But what higher self was actually leading me to, from the first day I packed my backpack and headed for the airport, was my first physical encounter with an alien life form. I had had plenty of encounters on subtler levels, but it seemed my mind was now ready for a physical being standing in front of me. After a while, I had become exhausted of the tourist trail of Cairo Luxor Hurghada. I no longer noticed that I was no longer following the pearl necklace. The mind figured, well, since I am here now, I ought to stay here, but higher self suggested to move on. It's a common mistake when following the trail of higher self. An experience higher self suggested has ended, but because it was good, we think we have to stick to it longer. The indicators to move on had long come and gone. After 2 weeks, my mood hit a low point, and with my mood having decreased, I started noticing other things. I got a headache from listening to the dumb animation music down at the swimming pool's tourist aerobic session. With anger, I started recalling Egyptians in Cairo throwing their trash into the river and other Egyptians bathing in that river. I became edgy, started snapping at other tourists, at Egyptian staff, and at myself. It was then I finally realized that I had cut the connection to the pearl necklace, and the first time I meditated in weeks. I sat down for meditation. What came up as the next most exciting option was to meet an outer dimensional or alien being in physical. I embraced this feeling within me and let go. Then I booked out of the hotel and flew back home. The funny thing was that I had reached the actual goal that I was looking for back at my starting point. But without taking the journey first, the starting point wouldn't feel like that and wouldn't have revealed my secret destination either. On the very evening of arrival, I lie in bed staring at the ceiling. I wasn't asleep yet when my body paralyzed. I couldn't move. Some would say I was in sleep paralysis and thus dreaming my experience, but I was really quite awake and aware. I nearly panicked because I couldn't move, but kept reminding myself it's all part of the journey. I felt my presence in the room. Of course, this is how the body might react to the cultural shock of an alien entering one's room. If something higher or outside of one's belief system shows up, it tends to overwhelm one's system. Higher vibrations tend to bring up one's own fears all at once. The being walked around the corner into my bedroom. It had taken on the appearance of a quite attractive woman, but I intuitively suspected that it had only taken on this appearance to ease my worries. The woman was wearing a violet overall with an undecipherable insignia on her breast. It looked like a spacesuit, but again I suspected this appearance was taken on in order to offer me something I can familiarize with. "Hi there," said the woman casually. She looked human except that her eyes were bigger and her body taller than that of any human alive. She looked majestic indeed. "Hi," I mumbled in a shy manner. I knew what was going on, but I suddenly felt very humble. You are paralyzing your body for protection. Your body contains energy gates that are not ready to be opened yet. It therefore stiffens in order not to be forced to reveal what it wants enclosed. Relax and breathe normally. Okay. I tried regaining my composure, but noticed that the parts of my body that weren't frozen were shaking uncontrollably. Apparently, I wasn't that ready for what I had wished for. "You understand that I am here because you intended for us to be seen. I am representative of what you allow yourself to see. Is this what you really look like?" I asked. "It is one form I commonly take," she responded. Telepathically, it was made understood that the form was taken for me, but that it also represented a form that the being has in its closet of forms, which was a limited amount of preferred forms to wear. In my female expression, "I really do look like this," yes, she added. I wanted to ask where she is from, but in my mind I realized that the actual question is, where am I at? I understood that I had allowed myself to enter another level of vibration in order to perceive her. I had energetically come halfway to her so that she could energetically come halfway to me, and in this way we could perceive each other. What she said next surprised me. "What you call for is granted, but again, there's really not too much use in seeing us in physical, except to nourish and satisfy the doubting mind." This was similar to what I had been told by the flying orbs at the lake. At that time, I insisted that it was of high use of me and ignore the comment. "But as a further link on your pearl necklace, it is appropriate," she added, smiling. At that moment, a ray of tingling warmth emanated from her into me. The shaking stopped, but parts of my body remained paralyzed. What was strange about this experience was that only certain parts were frozen. For example, the right thigh was frozen, but not the left one. Parts of the back were frozen, but not the whole back. "You know, I'm not part of your people, but your people asked me to take over the task of visiting you." This was not something she said verbally, but let me understand telepathically. "Well, thank you for visiting." This was all I could get out. I was in such awe that all the questions I might wanted to have asked were simply not there in the situation. She smiled. A few minutes after I leave, you can look out of the window and watch our craft fly away. Take a photograph if you want. That will be the hard evidence you longed for. Rather than disappearing, she walked around the corner the way she had come. Soon thereafter, I felt she had left the place. The paralysis eased off, but my body began trembling in various places, which made it difficult to get a camera and operate it. The object that appeared in the sky was silvery and violet. I took a picture. It sped away at an unearthly speed. A few minutes thereafter, tears came out of my eyes. I was still trembling and felt genuinely disoriented and alienated in the true sense of the word. Whereas on one level the effects of the encounter were inspiring, on the other hand, I found it difficult to focus on my daily tasks at hand. She was right. Inviting higher dimensional beings distracts from the earth experience which the soul had intended to have before incarnating. In the weeks thereafter, I experienced a few minor body disturbances, such as flickering of the eyes, headaches, and a few rushes of unfounded fear. After about a month, the experience settled or integrated, and I was back to normal, though probably I was never quite the same person again. The lesson my higher self had been leading me to was to devote myself to the beauty of the earthly experience rather than keep trying to get away, ascend, contact something else. Through the pearl necklace, it had taught me that there's always something higher behind what I seem to be wanting. First, it seemed like I wanted adventurous travel, but the desire behind that was an alien encounter. And the desire behind that was ultimately more love to earthly life. The circle had closed, and the necklace could be put on. Parallèle universal exploration. I was having an intense, lucid dream in which everything felt, sounded, and looked just as real and authentic as in my waking dream. In this lucid dream, I was living the version of myself that had become a songwriter. Apparently, I wrote songs for established and famous singers. The amazing thing about having entered this parallel life of mine was that it revealed information that was true in waking life, which I did not have knowledge of yet then. I was never interested in the singer Whitney Houston. Also, I did at that time not know that she was having trouble with drug abuse. But in my dream, I was visiting her in a drug clinic where she was trying to cope with getting off of drugs. I had visited her as someone to help her make a comeback in the music business. A record company had given me the assignment to write some new songs with her, have her try singing them. I recognized this as an actual parallel world because I had a complete set of memories from another life, and because all the details were in place, logical, and fit together. I was shocked at Whitney's appearance. My dreaming self somehow knew of her condition, but my waking life self vaguely remembered her as very good-looking. In front of me sat a wreck, hardly able to voice her statements, let alone sing songs. I had brought pen, paper, and some pre-written songs with me. We sat down together, and she told me, "I'm not really up to this, you know." I felt compassion with her, caressed her hands. "Then let's just write or choose songs you will be wanting to sing when you've recovered." She croaked a few lines of song I had written. She then looked through my texts and chose a few she liked. "What's the melody of this one supposed to be?" she asked. The meeting continued for what seemed like hours, in a completely realistic, sometimes boringly realistic manner. Whitney herself was not in very good shape. I went looking for a copy machine in the clinic to copy the text she had chosen. I left her with the texts in her dark mood and promised to return when she felt better. The difference to any other type of dream is the degree of realism without distraction by weirdness or unrealism. Also, the complete identity and set of memories contained in this person. I clearly felt that this was me, but another me, one that had little knowledge of the me in waking life. I had seamlessly entered from one waking life to another waking life. During my stay in this parallel world, I maintained a vague memory of my other life, for it was the me of my first life that was intruding on and viewing this one. After waking up to this life, I started getting interested in the person of Whitney Houston, which, as mentioned, I hadn't given any attention to up to now. I only recalled a few songs of hers from the 80s and a movie she once played in. Surfing the internet, I found out that she indeed had drug problems, even in this reality. Years later, her visiting drug clinics did enter this reality as a fact. Supernatural abilities. We often hear of people suddenly gaining extraordinary abilities under great stress, pressure, or survival instinct. The well-known story of a mother suddenly being able to lift a car with one hand to save her baby's life comes to mind. But it is not always necessary to be in a life-threatening situation in order to have higher abilities. Two occurrences from my life come to mind. One day, I was sitting there reminiscing about my childhood when it suddenly struck me like a bolt of lightning. As a child, I had been jumping from buildings and trees without injuring myself. Up to that day, I had somehow blocked this activity from my memory because it didn't fit into the laws that supposedly govern our physical existence. Another reason I hadn't remembered that was because as a child, I did not view this as anything unusual. I recalled all the times I had played as a child and displayed abilities one might find outrageous. Playing Zorro and hide and seek and Star Wars and all kinds of things. I recall jumping off the roof of a one-story house. I recall jumping off a tree and hitting the ground unscathed, and many more such incidents. My memory went on to other unusual events in my childhood. I actually drowned and lay underwater for quite a while before my cousin noticed I was missing and sent a search team into the lake to look for me. I was practically dead. Strangely enough, I also recall my parents scolding me for jumping down high places. They kept telling me, "You're going to break your arm. You're going to break your arm. You're going to break your arm." This mantra eventually sank in, and one day I actually did break my arm. Tears welled up recalling this. After that, there were no more high jumps. The amazing thing is how I had blocked these events from my memory, and how I was conditioned to believe that it is not possible or healthy to do things that weren't possible. I understand we all have abilities and potentials way beyond what we are conditioned to believe in this reality in which self-limitation is the main game. Feedback synchronicity. There was a time when I was younger when I purchased the complete series of a television show called Twin Peaks on video and watched the entire series twice within 1 week. It was a series I'd fallen in love with, and I had the desire to immerse myself in it entirely. I switched off the phone, purchased a lot of snacks, and closed myself into my place, watching the series for days in a row. After I had completed it, I watched the whole thing again, noticing yet subtler aspects of it. This total immersion of attention must have created a vibratory identification with it, because all kinds of odd synchronicities, coincidences, started popping up during and in the weeks after watching that related directly to the show itself. Something seen on the screen was seen and felt so intensely that it started reflecting in everyday life, and in very strange and fascinating ways too. I first noticed this when I went to the supermarket to stock up on snacks for watching that a woman stood in front of me that looked exactly like one of the characters from the show. She didn't look somewhat similar, but was a near identical copy of that character. And not only did she stand there, but also turned around and smiled at me, as if somehow knowing what my attention had been on. I took my shopping bags and followed her out to the parking space to have another look. As she drove away, I noticed her car had a sticker of a pine tree, the very symbol of the TV series. On my way home, my mind started working on the event. Being familiar with the concept of focus and synchronicity, I deducted that she had either been attracted into my universe or I had perceived her differently due to my current focus. What happened thereafter was even more striking. Maybe only people who have experienced waves of synchronicity themselves will fully appreciate or even believe the story. One interruption to my marathon video watching was an appointment I had at a hotel to meet someone who required coaching. We were sitting on a terrace for a cup of coffee when we heard an owl howl. The owl is, just like the pine tree, another main actor of the series. The person I was meeting was reminded of the series Twin Peaks and asked me if I had ever seen that series. Had I ever seen it? Well, that was all I had been seeing in the last days. This was significant in that nobody had ever asked me anything about Twin Peaks before. As far as I knew, this was the first time I had talked about it to anyone except my girlfriend. And it didn't stop there. I suspect that because of these two experiences, my belief in and therefore synchronicity flow accumulated and increased. I was looking out for correspondences everywhere now, almost to the brink of paranoia. Many numbers, names, and symbols did pop up that resembled or could have been easily interpreted as belonging to the show's vibe. But the next thing that happened really hit the mark. I was invited by someone I didn't know to travel to Seattle, Washington. It was a business proposal to coach a company. Searching on the internet, I could see they weren't directly located in Seattle, but in a small town called North Bend. I eventually declined the offer. Maybe I wouldn't have if I'd known then what I found out later. I had been a great fan of the series itself, but not to the extent that I would look up specifics on the internet or chat about it with people. A few weeks after the offer from North Bend near Seattle, did somehow get curious as to where the TV series was shot and looked it up on the internet. When I then realized it was all filmed around the area of North Bend, Washington, I had the realization of synchronicity. The attractor factor had become so intense that I had been invited to even be there physically. I mention this story to awaken the reader to the reality and mysterious joy of the interrelation of all things. Back then, I wasn't even aware of one of the makers of the series, David Lynch. It was about 5 years later that I got fascinated by other works of his, due to their correspondence to my interpretation of the many worlds theory, when I realized he had also been the creator of that old favorite series of mine. Moving through depression. When I was about 30, after having had many highs, professional success, personal success, extraordinary states, travels and experiences, fulfilling relationships, health, financial abundance, came my phase in which I was completely depressed despite all the things I had achieved. I felt disillusioned with all the things I'd been learning and teaching. I felt burned out, bored, and empty. I lie around home for days, not knowing what to do, not knowing where to go, not wanting to speak to anyone. I despised the books I had written and despised RC, which I temporarily viewed as utter nonsense after having taught it for more than 8 years. I was feeling so low and out of tune that I couldn't even get myself to use any of the techniques I'd been teaching and learning. And if I did, it didn't get me out of my state. Nothing got me out of it. I felt tired, fatigued, and dull all the time. Coffee, cigarettes, and sweets were my companions, but not even they did the job for me anymore. Either I was crying, sitting around dully, surfing the internet senselessly, or in my highest states, cursing someone or another. Deep down within, I knew there was still a part of me that wouldn't give up, or a part of me that was at least aware that I was completely depressed, but not even that part of me seemed to be sure anymore. I canceled several coaching and job commitments because I didn't want to stand in front of anyone in this state, but especially because I no longer believed that I could help anyone anyway, much less that what I said was significant. I recalled some lows from my teenagerhood, but this was one of the lowest states. After a few weeks, it eventually affected my health too. I started compulsively and uncontrollably twitching my muscles. What was going on with me? On the lowest points, I would awaken from some degraded and evil nightmare and find everything gray, meaningless, and dull. I'd feel extremely heavy during the day. I hadn't smiled in months. Even my sexual drive, which could normally get me out of low states, was at zero. I was single at the time, so at least I couldn't get on someone's nerves. Then, one morning I decided to come clean. I realized I was so low that it would have any effect at first, but I had to keep on moving upwards. I began by lying down and breathing myself through the most horrific scenarios I could imagine. And I lie for hours, breathing it all in, breathing it all out. Tears ran down my face. Once I had to take a break to throw up. After a few hours, I felt a bit lighter. I distracted myself with some movies and fell asleep. On the next day, I continued my cleansing and started using consciousness practice and tools again. I wrote a lot, used special affirmation techniques, meditated. I was still quite low, but now I was at least willing to do something. Days went by, still awakening in a heavy state, and always with a slight headache and nausea. I did a crying session of as long as I could. It took 45 minutes until all tears were out and I couldn't cry any longer. I did feel a bit lighter without having to enforce or create it. The problem had been that I was trying to create over my depression, trying to make myself more happy rather than letting it come naturally and simply allowing for a progress of slow, linear progression. It was when I was feeling a bit better that I once again realized what the issue was. I was in the belief of already having achieved everything, which is generally a good belief, but with the attached file of and there's nothing more interesting to achieve. It was simple as that. I realigned to new and higher versions of myself, and the phase passed as suddenly as it had come. Only a few weeks later, I couldn't even remember the low phase. Floating. It was at a time when I was using a flotation tank and going scuba diving that I had a few remarkable shifts in consciousness. A flotation tank is a sensory deprivation tank, once used by the NASA for non-gravity simulation and by dolphin researcher John C. Lilly for experimentation on consciousness. Today, they are mostly used for meditation. One lies in the dark and floats on salt water, having no sight, no sound, and nothing to do. All that is left is oneself and one's thoughts. I had a phase in which I was visiting a floating tank about 6 hours a week. In addition, I practiced scuba diving, which produces similar sensations of floating in a quiet mind. This overdose of floating apparently let something click within me that led to the following experience. As I walked around town, I at first felt sickened by life and overwhelmed by all kinds of appointments and things I had to take care of. I was sweating, had a headache, and was generally sick and tired of it all, hopelessly desperate for the peace I had been experiencing on and underwater. I tried breathing, coffee, meditating, etc. to change my mood, but on that day nothing worked. My dismal vibratory state led to the accumulation of various mishaps. In a parking garage, I got angry at the small parking spaces and then scratched my car on one of the walls, putting a dent and a white scratch into its side door. Driving out of the parking garage, I accidentally drove into a one-way street, was stopped by the police, and fined a large sum of money. Half an hour later, an important customer called off an assignment, having me lose another large sum. My headache increased. I stopped to get aspirin, took it, but the pain did not subside. I longed for a bed to lie down in and forget the world, but I was in a foreign city that day. Looking for hotels, I found that all hotels were fully booked, at least the ones I tried. A part of me realized that I was on a negative roll, and that the frequency I was emanating was attracting all sorts of undesirable events. I tried various techniques to change state, but nothing worked because I wasn't willing to give up resistance, wasn't willing to calm down. Inwardly, I started cursing the people I saw walking around, having a negative label for each and every one of them. Fucking tourists, damn cops, dumb Arabs, dumb Germans, and so on. I couldn't believe the hatred that was coming out of my mind. I started cursing all the efforts I had put into meditating in the floating tank. All for nothing, it seemed. Everything and everyone was suddenly a problem, because I was the problem. In the evening, I smelled of cold sweat. One look in the mirror showed rings under my eyes, rings I hadn't seen the day before. My head was pounding with pain. I had nowhere to go. I was mad at the world. It was in this moment I stopped the car and broke down crying. My head lay on the steering wheel, and I cried and cried. I felt remorse over the way things had been going in the weeks before and realized that this day was only the continuation of abysmal circumstances I had been going through. After crying, I sat in the car, staring at a river in front of which I was parked for hours. I had stopped doing anything. I had given up. Slowly but surely, a sense of deep peace was flooding me, like out of nowhere. But this was not my regular relaxation, not even the quite centered and smooth feeling I had after floating or diving. It was more than that. And it had come without forewarning, without technique, without desire. It flooded me like a powerful drug flowing through my veins. Not that I had ever experienced the really hard drugs, but in this instance I could imagine what it felt like. A rush of energy through my whole being. Tingling sensations all over my body. Inside I felt shifts of energy, rearrangements of some sorts, as if my skull was turning and my spine reloading. What seemed so very remote only a few hours ago was fully present now. My God, this feels good. And I hadn't had to go anywhere or see anything or do anything or take anything. I don't even know how it occurred. Had it been the overload of floating to higher realms that at first produced my catharsis and stroke of bad luck, and then the breakdown and breakthrough? Probably. I felt new and energized for weeks thereafter. The tingling sensation would be present when I woke up in the morning, rushing through my body in pulses of natural euphoria, and it would be with me when I lied down at night, blanketing me with waves of love and excitement. The car scratch suddenly became an amusing thing, not because I talked myself into it, but because it was so. This episode reminded me that sometimes, before things get better, they get worse. Another self-version seen by someone else. There was a time I was working on getting a black BMW sports car by magical means. I would lie in bed for hours daydreaming my experience of driving the car. The car did eventually manifest in physical reality. I simply went and purchased it as my income had experienced a surge. But what happened before that was quite amazing. A coaching student wrote an email to me that he saw me driving on a certain highway in Switzerland. He asked me if I owned a black BMW, because that's what he saw me in. I asked him when exactly he had seen me. I told me last Thursday. This corresponded exactly with the day that I was vividly daydreaming myself driving the black BMW, also on a highway in Switzerland. The person had seen a parallel universe version of myself. Mutual dream. I woke up beside my girlfriend and realized we had been lying forehead to forehead. After she awoke, I started telling her the dream I had about being at some location with a flamingo statue. Since she had the very same dream, she was able to continue the story of the dream. She not only had a similar dream, but the very same dream, only from her viewpoint. We could actually take turns continuing the story that the dream told. Apparently, we had shared a common reality during the dream. Another very real parallel universe. I keep teaching people that the outside surroundings appear not to change at first when applying shape-shifting or reality identification technique. But sometimes, if one is open to radical change, even the outer surroundings change dramatically on the very same day of applying the pure technique. That morning, I had meditated and shifted myself into a slightly different reality. I was scheduled to go to a hairdresser around midday. This is a hairdresser I had been to many times. Upon arrival, I was astonished and even slightly shocked to find that a brand new building had been built right beside the hairdresser's place. How could they build it so quickly? I asked myself. I had only been there 4 weeks ago, and 4 weeks ago there was a lawn and a park bench without any sign of building or even planned building. I stood there for a while, baffled and confused. I entered the hairdresser's shop and commented, "When did they build that house right beside?" Pointing to the house. The staff behind the counter looked at me incredulously. "Oh, it's been standing since a few years, actually. I remember when it was built," said one of them. "That was shortly before Christmas 5 years ago." I stared in disbelief. But wasn't there a park bench and a small grass hill there before? They couldn't tell me or couldn't remember, but they looked at me as if I had something mixed up. I could have sworn that only a few weeks ago the place looked entirely different. After getting my hair cut, I went out to further examine the place. Behind the building and on the other sides of the hairdressers, everything looked exactly as it had before, except for this brand new building that was also inhabited. Finally, I accepted that I had merely shifted into a parallel reality and that this building was a good indicator of that. It was the first of very many physical reality shifts that I learned to accept over time, rather than labeling me insane, as consensus reality would probably do it if they read these lines. The Invisible Man. I recall playing hide and seek as a child and knowing how to make myself invisible to other kids who were looking for me. I recall developing a technique where I didn't even have to look for hiding places anymore, but simply become invisible or merge, shape-shift into my surroundings. This involved not directly looking at or thinking about the person looking for me and acting as if I were non-existent or melted in with the bushes or buildings I was at. In these instances, the kids looking for me would simply walk right past me without noticing me standing or sitting there. I recall at least half a dozen instances of me applying this technique. Shifting pain within minutes. I lie in the bed of a hotel room, unable to sleep because of a nearly unbearable toothache I am having. The hotel is relatively remote, so there is no pharmacy nearby. Neither does the receptionist have any aspirin. If I could just take a painkiller, I would have done it without hesitation. I attempted to use some of the techniques I teach, such as breathing into the pain, but none of them worked. The motivation behind using the techniques was resistance, and they only made the pain worse. I tried to focus on something else like reading or TV, but I couldn't. The pain was so intense that my vision blurred. The pain went all the way from my mouth to the head. At last, I remembered my parallel universe shifting idea that I teach people. If it really works, it should also work now, right? I envisioned another version of me lying in bed. A version of me that lie there in peace without pain. A version of me that never had any toothache to begin with. A version of me that didn't need to heal anything. I lie beside that version for a while. And as soon as I felt ready, I rolled my body over into that version of me, became that version. The pain subsided almost immediately. I don't know how quickly it vanished because I wasn't paying attention to it. After all, I was the version who never had it. But that was the end of the toothache story, and I fell asleep in peace. OceanoFPDF.com. 14 Identity and Reality. Masking and unmasking the self. Where many spiritual traditions seek to unmask the self to find the real selves behind all the assumed selves, reality creation seeks to mask the self, not randomly or reactively, but purposefully. Spiritual enlightenment resembles taking of all masks and identification. What is left when you remove everything? And what is left after you even remove what is left? The true self is left. The infinite self is left. Reality creation is in some ways the opposite pole or the other side of the coin. It resembles putting on a disguise for Halloween. Ultimate self is infinite, and while it contains and experiences all identities, it has no identity. It is impersonal and wears no masks. Finding enlightenment in the traditional sense can be as easy or difficult as ceasing to create anything at all. CRC as putting on a mask in order to correspond to a certain aspect of all that is. But once you notice how you have taken off the costume, you don't have to criticize yourself for it. Simply put it back on. Why people tend to curse themselves for having strayed off a desired path is a mystery to me. The realization itself is a fine opportunity to get back on path. But the behavior of self-invalidation again implies I didn't create it. There are causes outside of me, causes forcing me to take off my mask. The reality creation practitioner will simply put the mask back on, nothing more, nothing less. When I talk about reality creation being similar to taking on a role, taking on a new identity, they often respond with, I couldn't do that. I can't be someone that I am not. And that's exactly the reason they will not experience anything new, because they so firmly believe, I am this and that. But RC doesn't teach that one must be something one doesn't want to be. It teaches that if a certain reality is desired, then that is really you, and that you can get a deeper connection with that already existing part of you. Just who do you think you are? RC basically teaches only two identities or identifications, world self and infinite self. For the purpose of an even more detailed focus, I have broken these two basic identities down, separated them into fragments that one could theoretically and practically discern and notice. This separation is by no means necessary, but it provides a few interesting insights into an otherwise mysterious realm. It will not hurt to release some of the less fulfilling aspects of identity. In other words, it's much easier when you're not wearing many masks on top of each other at the same time. In fact, de-identification followed by re-identification creates the most magic. That is why the pure technique begins in de-identified silence and proceeds with a new identification. What follows is a scale of identities, with the upper ones being more related to infinite self and the lower ones more related to world self. 1. Infinite self. The aspect of self that contains all, is all and none of it all at the same time. Source. 2. Oversoul. This is the viewpoint of self that projects itself into various existences, dimensions, parallel universes, spaces, and timelines. To give you a picture, look at your hand with its 5 fingers. One of these fingers is your current existence in this time and space. The other fingers are other versions of yourself in other realms. The hand itself is the oversoul. 3. Higher self. This is the viewpoint of I, without any further definitions. This is the witness, not far removed from infinite self, and even less removed from oversoul. In our analogy, the fingers are the identities, the hand the oversoul, and the higher self is one or more of the knuckles. Higher self remains unidentified with any of these things and events. It can perceive, observe, and witness the events. It has greater overview and wisdom than the world's self. As soon as it identifies with something, it becomes a core identity. 4. Core identity. This is one of the fingers of the oversoul, one of its existences. The minimal definition of the core identity is I am. The core self does not have to be achieved. You are already it. The formula of I have to do X in order to be myself is nonsensical from this viewpoint. This is the spontaneous self, the childlike, not childish self, the free self that can easily identify and de-identify with things. This is also what you are when you are a discarnate soul. The core identity is aware of all the identities below on the scale and also aware of higher self, while all identities below are mostly unaware of higher aspects. 5. Identity. This is the I am followed by another word. I am this, I am that. The basic identities are made up of character traits, personality, mental images, beliefs, intentions, and physical looks with which I identifies itself. This is a clearly defined viewpoint from which one perceives. This is where pure consciousness identifies with physical substance. This is the world self, as distinguished from infinite self. For purposes of examination, the basic identity can be broken up into further identities. 5.1. Claimed identity. These are a set of traits that are claimed by the self for the purpose of experiencing a specific reality. Some schools would call this the ego self. Example, I am a doctor. When the world self claims an identity, it starts corresponding to a certain reality, attracting situations that match what was claimed. 5.2. Ambivalent identity. These are a set of traits which world self sometimes wants to be and sometimes doesn't want to be, as they are composed of desire and resistance. What they refer to can seem hard to release. Example, in the morning you say, I really enjoy being a doctor, and in the evening you say, I hate being a doctor. Because of the ambivalence and indecisiveness involved, neither manifests fully so that one can move on. The recommended practice for release would be to become aware of the thesis-antithesis nature of the issue and move to a viewpoint above the two, synthesis core identity, in which neither of the two are fully relevant and both are seen as the same issue. From this higher viewpoint, a new identity can be assumed. 5.3. Resistant and projected identity. The resistant identity goes along with the projected identity. They are two sides of the same coin. If you say, I am a good doctor, and he is a bad doctor, then the I am good is the resistant identity. It was assumed in order to protect oneself or resist something or someone in physical reality. The he is bad is the projected identity that automatically follows from the resistant identity. I am smart, he is stupid. One side is the resistant identity, the other side the projected identity. When pure consciousness or a neutral awareness puts on a mask, then one of the things he sees through this mask are things that oppose it. This is how resistant and projected identities are created. It would, however, be possible to assume an identity, mask, without invalidating the opposite of it. This occurs by choosing masks in free choice rather than as a reaction to others or circumstances. The realization here is that both sides are you. Although it may be hard to grasp, labeling someone as inherently stupid would not only filter out all evidence to the contrary, but has the effect of labeling yourself as stupid, and will not only attract all types of undesired people into your life, but also the opposite, someone who you perceive as being smarter than you and you stupid in comparison. This is the turnaround when the projected identity becomes the resistant identity and vice versa. Then it's, I am stupid, he is smart. 6. Unwitting identity. This is a set of traits that self has taken on or projects without noticing it. These are masks from which you perceive without noticing the masks themselves. Any of the aforementioned identities can be unwitting, subconscious, and often are. 7. Approval identity. This is a set of traits you pretend to be because they are seen as somehow beneficial. It is a dishonest, fake identity. The approval identity is the same thing as 3.1. But you claim it in order to look a certain way in front of others, while sensing that it is not really you. It is called approval identity because you claim it in order to avoid disapproval or what you fear would be disapproval, and to gain approval or what you think would be approval from others. Identity can further be split and fragmented for detailed examination. We can move it further up to levels of God consciousness and further down to stereotype costume identities and parasitical or demonic identities. But the already shown basic identities are quite enough gain some extraordinary insights and quicken the re-expansion of self. Comment on identities. An identity is a defined viewpoint from which life is experienced. It allows the experience of one parallel universe as distinguished from another. Infinite consciousness which flows through an identity becomes attention. The traits of the identity determine which facets of reality attention will flow towards routinely, and therefore which realities are consolidated to physical form. The claimed identity wishes to assume certain viewpoints and steer attention and efforts corresponding to that viewpoint in a reality. It wants to experience. An ambivalent identity is a package of claimed identities plus resistance, plus projected identity. It is an identity that has gotten so immersed in identification, it is in the process of disintegration. A resistant identity has the intention not to experience a certain reality, which it therefore will. Its aim is to fight, beat, overwhelm a projected enemy. And if it can't do that, it will subdue itself to the opponent, become a victim of that opponent. The polarization between the two creates an energy field of tension that easily attaches to sadness, fear, and anger. The persistent identity rarely realizes that the projection is himself. It is mostly convinced that the other is the bad guy. The resistant identity is caught in imaginary scenes with its enemy. The projected identity was constructed by the resistant identity so that it could have something to fight. The easily recognizable traits of an identity are opinions, beliefs, attitudes, morals, memories, preferences, habits, addictions, emotions, pains, body postures, presence, originality, relative status, relationships, use of language. Comment on the relationship between individual identity and group identity. A strong group identity does not come about by homogenizing or conforming individuals, making them all the same. This is a common misunderstanding. A powerful and effective group identity originates when each individual is strengthened in its individuality and differences. That would be diversity in unity or unity in diversity rather than only one of the sides. Unity does not mean to eliminate diversity, but to appreciate the differences and have each individual give their unique contribution to the whole. If each individual were to follow his highest joy and purpose, the pieces of the group puzzle would fit together perfectly without coming into conflict with others. Only by not being himself does he not fit to the group. The artificial dichotomy of left-wing and right-wing politics takes place on a level where this is not completely understood. Meeting people you don't like. 2 things to keep your energy when meeting people you don't like: love or leave. If you are aware enough, you will recognize the undesirable person as a projected identity, and from that notice what resistant identity you have taken on. In this sense, that meeting is a gift that allows you to find out more about yourself. Once you notice the resistant identity, it begins dissolving automatically. If you are not aware enough to notice the reflection and change your reaction, then you have the option of leaving and placing your attention on things you prefer. Do not watch so much for the energy flowing from others to you, but the energy flowing from you to others. Meditations on identity. If you wish to learn more about all of this or release some suspected unwanted aspects of yourself, thus coming into more conscious connection to infinite self, you might want to apply some of these meditations. I do remind the reader once again that the quickest way to solve issues is the pure technique, and that all else is merely game or detailed examination. Meditations on ambivalent identities. In preparation for working with ambivalent identities and suppressed aspects of self, You might want to try the following experiment to gain an understanding of how the ambivalence comes to be. 1. Write down some things you used to like but don't like anymore. 2. Write down some things you used not to like but like now. The process. Sit in silence and relax into the viewpoint of the non-identified witness. Notice an ambivalent identity, meaning someone you sometimes like being and sometimes not like being. Example, I want to be free, I will end a relationship, and I want to be connected and stay in the relationship. Notice both identities and how they exist in different universes with no apparent connection or overlay to each other. Once you are aware of the two sides of yourself, start projecting, creating a beam of resistance on the version of yourself desiring something. Afterwards, create a beam of desire on the version of yourself desiring something. Then project desire on the version of yourself resisting something. Then project resistance on the version of yourself resisting something. Then merge both sides of yourself in your imagination. Then observe neutrally from a higher vantage point in which neither of these decisions are truly you, neither of them are truly relevant. After you open your eyes, ask yourself, who do I want to be, independent of circumstances? And then identify with that new version of yourself, resting in it and releasing it to infinity. Note that you don't have to decide for either of the two viewpoints, but rather take in an entirely different third viewpoint and feel it, and then watch the events unfold naturally from there. The purpose of intentionally projecting resistance and desire on both versions of yourself, which may seem a strange thing to do at first, has the purpose of neutralizing polarities. You will feel the effects of it even if you don't fully understand it. The whole meditation takes about 10 minutes per topic. Meditations on resistant and projected identities. In general, you are aware of one side of the resisted projected identity while being unaware of the other side. The purpose of this process is to use the side you are aware of to find out what the other side of the coin is. By doing this, the side you are unaware of comes to light and dissolves in this light of awareness. A game you see through and notice as limiting or stupid is no longer worthwhile, and one normally quits doing it naturally. By viewing the side you are aware of, you extrapolate the side you are not aware of. Once you become aware of the other side of an identity coin, simply witness it without resistance or self-invalidation for a few moments. Then simply witness the interaction between both identities. Then witness how they are both created by you, and how one cannot exist without the other. State that this is no longer I, and allow yourself to be the identity you want to be without having to invalidate its opposite. The meditation itself will lead to a lot of relief and the discontinuation of games you no longer want to play. The process is 1. Notice the projected or resistant identity and from that extrapolate the other side. 2. Witness both sides. 3. Witness the interaction between them. 4. Decide to be what you want to be without invalidating its opposite. People you can do the process with. Someone who causes you to react emotionally. Let's say you see that the projected identity is an angry person. From it, you become aware that the resistant identity is fearful me or also getting angry me. Your partner during a fight. Let's say that the projected identity is she doesn't listen to me. From it, you become aware that the resistant identity is, I can't explain myself, or what I say is not interesting. Something you like about yourself that separates you from others. Let's say you notice, I am so good looking. The projected identity then might be, they are ugly, and so on. Spiritual version of handling projected resistant identities. 1. Observe reality as you perceive it. 2. See this impression as a projected identity. 3. Discover or imagine the resistant identity. 4. Notice the interaction and separation between both. 5. Define that this is no longer you and choose who you want to be without invalidating something else for it. To play a game, you need at least 2 parties and the interaction between these 2 parties. Most people's awareness is limited to a point where they aren't even aware of these 3 components and believe that they exist independently of each other. But nothing that happens outside of or independently of you. The aforementioned meditation takes you out of the limited viewpoint of A by showing you the viewpoint of B and the interaction C, and finally, the viewpoint outside of it all, which realizes that ABC is one single thing. Observe something. Now notice how this event consists of three things: the observer, the observed, and the observing itself. And all three are one thing. Meditations on approval and disapproval. The pressure of try to look good and avoiding to look bad, rather than resting in alignment with your desires, is the issue here. Craving for approval and fearing disapproval is a form of being dependent on other people's attention for well-being. They are based upon beliefs of how you're supposed to behave or not behave in others' opinions. In the timeline reality, they were conditioned into the child self that was desperate to gain its parents' attention. If you're a good boy, you get X. If you're a bad boy, you get Y. This leads to the person putting on masks in order to gain approval or praise or attention or love and avoid disapproval or criticism or removal of attention and love. Having to look good. Identity leads to you becoming a chess figure in the game of society. All others have to do is to push your buttons and you will behave according to their desires. Having to look good. Identity has the aim of fulfilling someone else's desires, or what they mistakenly believe are someone else's desires, in order to gain approval or avoid disapproval. The less attention or approval or appreciation you give yourself, the more you'll be dependent of others' attention, or even what I call chemical attention, meaning alcohol, food, nicotine, or drugs. If these other people's desires, or what you assume are other people's desires, do not fit to your own desires, an inner contradiction arises. Someone pushes the button of impending approval or disapproval, and you quickly forget the desires or intentions you had. You quickly lose poise and start working to fulfill the apparent needs of the other. All of this touches on the subjects of peer pressure, social status, and expectations of others. Most of the beliefs a child creates are based on its reactions to disapproval/punishment or approval/reward of its parents. Just as much as the parents are trying to fulfill their child's desires, the child is trying to fulfill its parents' desires, albeit in a more random way. Both parties, parents and child, measure their success by the approval gained. This is where the source of stress lies. Whenever you experience pressure, it is probably based on a core belief about what someone else is supposedly expecting from you. Although the circumstances have completely changed since your childhood, these beliefs are still operating on some level. Since this is an issue that can drag you out of alignment with your deliberately chosen reality, it is an issue worth looking at. Persistently resting in your claimed reality means continuing to do so despite disapproval from others or society. Saying no to someone can be done without attacking or invalidating them, in a soft and respectful way. Saying no in a rebellious way implies that you are projecting some belief about what their expectations to you supposedly are. If you do have to look good identity, then this saying no to someone will arise as an emotional reaction and culminate in a fight or argument. A loving, respectful no, on the other hand, can work miracles. Should the expectations of others have become too strong, then a change of job or location can be helpful. Fear of criticism and disapproval is more detrimental. But even addiction to approval and praise can become a problem with which others can manipulate you. When you are desperate for approval, there is most certainly something amiss with you. Becoming aware of these factors and releasing them will reduce stress and conditioned responses and increase honesty, authenticity, and self-determination. If you'd like a deeper examination of this issue, you may want to try out the following process. For addiction to approval. 1. Write down the name of someone who gave you attention or approval when you really needed it. 2. Write down what identity you had to take on in order to gain this approval. 3. Write down what needs you believe this person to have that makes you behave the way you do. Example: 1. Mom. 2. A good and decent son. 3. I hope my children are responsible. My son seems to be lazy. Once you got that down, go into meditation and view the person projecting the expectation and yourself putting on a mask in order to fulfill that expectation. Notice the stress or pressure between the two parties. Notice that the whole thing is your belief. Then release the whole image. Re-identify with your true nature. For fear of disapproval. 1. Write down the name of someone that disapproved of you. 2. Write down the identity you took on in order to avoid their disapproval. 3. Write down what needs you believe the person to have that makes you behave the way you do. Example. 1. Dad. 2. Get good grades at school. High bad grades. 3. I want to be proud of my children. Once you've gotten that down, go into meditation and view the person projecting the expectation and yourself putting on a mask to resist it. Notice the pressure between the two parties. Notice the whole thing as your belief. Then release the whole image. Re-identify with your true nature. The habits of identity. Definition: habit. Something you apparently do automatically, unwittingly, or half-consciously. In a positive sense, something that happens effortlessly almost by itself. In a negative sense, something that seems to happen beyond your control. An example for a helpful habit. Driving the car, you don't have to think about every movement consciously. An example for a non-helpful habit. Eating too much without thinking about it or feeling able to stop it. Definition: ritual or routine. In a helpful sense, a collection of actions that reproduce certain results and states reliably. In a non-helpful sense, a collection of habits, a mega habit, that seems to be running on automatic. Purpose of this section: to show you how much of your life is run by habit and how habits are sustained by identity and choice, and can easily be dislodged. Releasing unwanted habits. The key to releasing habits is consciousness or awareness. Habits only seem so powerful because they run unwittingly or half-consciously. But once you become aware of a habit as a habit, it's actually not a habit anymore, unless your belief dictates that it still is. The moment you become aware of a habit as a habit, you can quit doing it just like that. Becoming aware of it may suffice to completely dissolve the habit. An example: you become aware that you run down the stairs every day in a way that strains your knees and legs. Once you are aware of that, you go down the stairs in a more mindful and slow fashion. If becoming aware of and repeating the opposite a few times is not enough, people try to overcome habits using raw willpower. Raw willpower only works if unbending persistence and hard work is behind it. Otherwise, it will just produce more of the habit and end in resignation. Why? If you say, I am going to forget about this, that already implies remembering. Not thinking about smoking already implies thinking about it. Most of the times, raw willpower is a failure method and exhausting at that. Some schools teach that the elements or building blocks of a habit need to be reversed, changed, or confused, and that this will release the habit. This works to the extent that it makes you aware of the habit. But I'd like to suggest other approaches that are more in alignment with the art of allowing or the art of uneffortness. If you simply use the pure technique and truly align with the preferred version of yourself, you wouldn't be doing anything in this direction. The alignment itself takes care of unwanted habits automatically. But let's assume that for some reason you chose a longer path. In this case, I would recommend for you to consciously reproduce or create the unconscious habit. What you create, on purpose, you gain a certain amount of control over. If, for example, I notice myself biting my nails all the time and being unable to stop, I would start biting my nails on purpose. Becoming the source of biting on your nails implies that you can release it. By making something worse intentionally, you become overly aware of it, so that soon you will say, what am I doing here anyway? I might as well quit. By creating something on purpose, you gain insight on why you are even creating it, payoff, and that it is you that is creating it. Maybe the payoff of biting your nails is a sense of relaxation, which you can then allow without having to bite your nails for it. Nothing you do for mysterious reasons. You may want to add copying or creating the unwitting behavior with switching to creating the behavior you prefer instead, and alternating the two. This means you would intentionally be biting your nails and then intentionally putting your hands on the table and relaxing them. You would alternate between the two, back and forth, until the automatism no longer shows up and you can easily rest your hand on the table. Soon your habit will disappear altogether. Creating new habits is a question of associating plenty of positive things with the new habit you want to create. So if, for example, you can't overcome yourself to create the habit of jogging in the morning, but you'd really like to anyway, then what you do is connect as many benefits to jogging as possible or list all the different ways in which jogging is good, fun, beneficial. Training yourself on this will soon have you become addicted to what you previously avoided. Again, applying the pure technique, none of this is necessary. But since the easiest way is not always the appropriate way, I hint on additional ways. Mirror world meditation. Notice something that bothers you. Ask yourself, which version of me feels bothered by that? Ask yourself, which version of me wouldn't feel bothered by that? Identify with that version of you and look as that version. Everything is a reflection of you. Everything that happens is part of the process. If you want to know what you think about yourself, notice what you think about others. The authority of the creator. How well a teaching or technique works depends on the authority with which you use them. If applied with authority, even the most mediocre methods will be effective in change. If the authority of the creator, which is composed of self-worth, self-trust, self-love, and self-responsibility, is at a low point, not even the most brilliant methods and things will have any effect on the self. Meditations on higher self. On a relatively low level of awareness, higher self is viewed or experienced as God, angels, guardian angels, etc. On a bit of a higher level of awareness, higher self is viewed or experienced as intuition, inner coach, soul guide, inner guru, as something with which one can communicate. On yet a higher level of awareness, one doesn't communicate with higher self, but as higher self. On this level, one recognizes higher self as part of oneself, aspect of oneself, or as oneself, without much or any separation. Linearly speaking, on a mediocre level of awareness, this part of oneself is seen as something outrageously distant and huge, something one must bow down to. But on a fairly normal level of awareness, it appears as accessible, as a higher being, a magical thing. Communicating with it can be as easy as simply assuming that this part of you exists and beginning a dialogue with it. This higher self reacts to honesty and humor. So keep your conversation straightforward and light. You can ask this God within yourself any question. The questions are always answered according to what you are able to handle. They can come while you are in a normal state of mood as symbols, intuition, hunches, dreams, and coincidence. If they do come directly and there's no need to decipher, then usually when you are in a high state of mood. Your life is designed by higher self, so enjoy its design. Before you incarnated onto this planet, you designed the parameters of your life, not the details, but a rough outline, where you'd be born, what you would look like, what basic vibratory level you'd have to start with, a few interests you'd have, and a few people that you would definitely meet. This pre-incarnate viewpoint of yours is higher self, that is simultaneously aware of incarnation and pre-incarnation, while world self is solely aware of incarnation. Within the rough outline of your life's plan, world self exercises free will and can choose to take other routes than those planned. Taking the pre-paved route of higher self, ultimately yourself, is always the easiest and most fun thing to do, but you can always make it harder. The rough outline can be termed destiny, albeit a flexible destiny. This destiny can, by power of free will, deviate into many variations. Coming off your self-chosen path too far, stretching the limits of your previously chosen life, causes suffering and pain. If you don't like what scenery you have chosen for yourself, don't fight it. Instead, return to the viewpoint of higher self, in silence, and choose a new path from that viewpoint. That is one way to change the rough outline or destiny despite still being incarnate. The inner coach called higher self is always present in the background with a soft smile. It never denies a question addressed to it. It never denies a desire addressed to it. The only catch is noticing its guidance. You desire something, but higher self, the creative aspect of infinity, has its own way of delivering, and this often does not match the limited views of world self on how something is supposed to be delivered. Since world self is unwilling to imagine that event X could possibly have anything to do with his or her desire Y, she denies it. Higher self is you, but simply the version of you beyond the concerns of world self. World self may become so immersed in physical reality that this other aspect seems non-existent or very far away. Higher self is the observing witness that is not seduced by the ever-changing winds of desire and resistance. Although it is sometimes overlooked in the noise and chatter of daily life and the mind, its presence is never really lost. A few minutes of silence immediately reconnects you to it. Because of its expanded viewpoint of seeing the big picture, it naturally expresses love, understanding, compassion, and humor. Higher self follows the path of least resistance, the path of effortless playfulness and joy. World self follows a path of calculated strategy, seemingly to its own benefit, and gets immersed in a world of struggle, separation, and daily duality. It resists and craves. Its attention jumps around like that of a frightened chicken gone mad. It is immersed in fear and rigid opinions on right and wrong, and looks for satisfaction out there. Higher self gives into the flow of infinity that governs the unfolding of universes. It observes life with a light touch, abandon, and appreciation. It doesn't judge and knows not of lack, ownership, or need. Higher self does have the ability to act or intervene, but if it does, then only in the interests of a more comprehensive overview. The observer and higher self. When world self eases or neutralizes charged attention, goes into silence or becomes acceptant, or allows more well-being to flow, it reconnects with higher self. The observer mode allows one to see reality as it really is without all the filters. The meditation of higher self consists in observing the world from the higher self viewpoint. This is the same as the silence without labeling from the pure technique, except that isn't necessarily done with eyes closed. One silently observes the restless mind with compassion or neutral attention. This has nothing to do with self-analysis or introspection. That would be observing the mind with the mind trying to figure something out or questioning what is happening. Instead, you observe without expectation or judgment. You are pure, crystal clear awareness. You may observe the mind conducting its typical introspection and analysis, but since you are observing that, you are not involved. You observe how the world self is thrown here and there by desire and resistance, how it suffers and celebrates, how it goes here and there, does this and that. All the while, higher self remains soft and silent. You are identified with the ever-present ocean of silence behind worldly events. The meditation needn't be done continuously, but allowed occasionally. Higher self will not evaluate situations the same way a human does. This is why it may seem as if the advice coming from higher self is not to the immediate benefit of the urgent world self. An indicator that your current life experience is aligned with higher self is well-being.